everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Whoa.
We are trying something new tonight.
Yes. Go ahead.
What's it?
You set this up.
I did set this up. So I was speaking with Sam Tignanelli and Dan Akin of Freedom Tour, and they managed to get the group link for the Injection of Truth conference that is happening in Alberta. The UCP is putting it on. We've got some really amazing doctors, a lot that we know here in Ontario.
Yeah. Dr. David Speicher, Dr. Byram Bridle, Dr. Mark Trozzi, Dr. Chris Shoemaker, Dr. Jessica Rose, Dr. William Makis will all be part of the conference tonight.
So we are hoping to bring that to you live. We are just waiting for the Alberta part of the conference to start. We have the link. I don't know if I guess when we do stream, we're going to be screen sharing it because obviously their link is not on StreamYard. Right. But we've spoken with Sam and Dan, and we're hoping that everything starts here shortly. I know
we said we get started at 8, so here we are. We may as well just set it up. This is in Calgary. This is the Injection of Truth conference, and you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, that's what I thought I was doing.
Well, just the details.
The details. So Sam and Dan of Freedom Tour managed to get the group link for this so that we could live stream it out. They also, hey, Doug Michaels, nice to see you, have arrived with us. I know we normally start the show at 9 o'clock, but tonight, because out in Calgary, the Injection of Truth conference starts at starting right now. So we are just waiting for them to go live. Sam and Dan are waiting patiently for the conference to start at their end. And once it does, then we've got Michael Chuchong set up to pull the live stream through us. There's Chuchong waiting patiently for it to start at Sam and Dan's thing. But basically, the Injection of Truth, it's a truth conference, obviously, but it's about the vaccine mandates and what went wrong, the mistakes that were made, the lies that were told. And this is all these amazing doctors. Chris just showed the poster just a moment ago. All these amazing doctors who are being hosted by the UCP party, that's Danielle Smith's party in Alberta. I do believe it is a fundraiser that they're doing out there to raise money, I'm assuming for the UCP, but they have brought all these doctors in, Dr. Byram Bridle, Dr. Mark Trozzi, Dr. Chris Shoemaker, Dr. David Speicher, and a few, Dr. Makis, and all of these gentlemen are going to be speaking and telling truth of what they know about COVID, what went wrong during COVID, the shots that are currently hurting people. And also David Speicher will be bringing forward what he found when he tested the vials of the vaccine shots that were sent to him from Australia. And, you know, way back at the beginning, I know my friend Todd Andrew Noel and myself were hitting the streets of Coburg and hitting up the vaccine clinic that was happening in Coburg and trying to hand out Pfizer documentation right from their own website to inform people before they went in and got the shots. But Todd also held this great big huge poster talking about how the shots had human DNA in it, and nobody believed us. So this was right at the very beginning, 2020 and 2021. And it wasn't until this year when David Speicher was sent these vials, because this is his profession. He's the expert in this area. And he was sent the vials from Australia and he tested them. And sure enough, he found, is it SV40, I believe it was, in the shots, which is human DNA in these shots. And he is going to be in Alberta speaking on the stages in front of these politicians. So when these politicians try and deny, there's no way that they can. Oh, it looks like we're going live.
Well, let's just talk about this real quick because just before we get the sound for this thing. Small talk as we wait. Any thoughts on Arkansas suing Pfizer? You know what? We're not up on that particular lawsuit. We've looked into other ones, and Pfizer's main defense is the government knew all along. So really, we're not at fault. We're not liable here. And we know that there are subclauses in the Pfizer documents that mean that the government has to assume the cost and liability for all of these lawsuits. And so we'll see. We'll see if Arkansas has a better take on it. If they're committing fraud and they can prove that they committed fraud in their contracts to the government, then yes, they may have a case. So we will look into that and we will talk about it on the next show. How's that?
Perfect. All right.
All right. Looks like we're ready to go.
Let's go.
Bring us in. So it looks like we're still waiting. We're not getting audio at our end because they're not sending audio from their end, I think, at this point. So we are still waiting on that. And as soon as we get audio, we will let you know on there. In the meantime, we will be having, it looks like James Roguski on Thursday.
Yes.
And that will probably be a pre-record, because we will be here. Our friend Todd Michael Harris is in town with his new movie, The People versus David and Colette Steffen, and he's touring and he's finally hit Ontario. So we're going to be with him on Thursday night and then traveling along with him to Ottawa as well. So, but I think we're going to try and carve out some time to interview them while they're here as well. So, so we'll be able to show that to you guys as well.
Find out where their best cities were so far to date, where they've had the most success, and what kind of feedback they're getting from people. Exactly.
Okay.
I'm just trying to find out if they've got sound at their end. And
I am trying to work it out from our end if we can. All right, let's bring it back in. There we go.
No, we've got sound coming through on my computer. So they've got sound at their end, but we don't have sound coming through yet. Amen. They just did an opening prayer. Are we able to get sound through Chooch's machine? Because there is sound.
So you're not hearing that sound? I'll try and reshare it.
No, it's not coming through. I can hear it on my machine, but no sound coming through on us.
All right. This is the first time we've done this, by the way, from a Zoom meeting. So we had a few technical things to work out before we even got here today. There we go. Nope.
No, still no.
Let me change the source.
Okay, Chooch is just working on the source. We can hear it coming through my computer. It looks like they're standing for Canada. Oh, here it comes. There we go. Now we've got sound.
Perfect.
Oh, they must be having technical difficulties in Alberta. They just asked everybody to sit down again.
So they, so they've got it from their end, and then they issued out streaming licenses for this Zoom call. And I think this is a new thing for a lot of the guys involved right now. So they're still trying to work that out. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll bring them back on. We've got those black boxes all worked out. So we were going to talk about some of the some of the government stuff going on, particularly in the States, and especially in the States right now. There's a couple things going on. Number one, they're pointing out that the Chinese have bought a lot of farmland in the States, and all that farmland seems to be surrounding key military structures and bases. And that seems to be something that I think Dr. Phil said he came up with that. His team came up with it. Oh, there we go.
Shoot Majumdar also sends his greetings from Ottawa. And to those watching via stream, in England, New York, as far as Australia, thank you, everybody. The last 4 years have affected all of us on many levels, whether it be physically, mentally, financially, emotionally, and even spiritually. The reality is that lockdowns, mandates, and the one-size-fits-all approach broke friendships, divided neighbors, split families, ruined marriages, and destroyed many small businesses. I understand that difficult decisions had to be made, but with difficult decisions come difficult questions. On behalf of my constituents, my fellow Albertans, and my family, I want to help find answers to these difficult questions. I'm here because I believe that the only way to get to the truth is through transparent dialogue and an open exchange of ideas with freedom to share facts, data, and accurate information. Cancel culture is alive and well. There are many out there who did not want this town hall to occur. The hate that Daryl, tonight's speakers, and myself have received has been overwhelming. I'm going to give you one example, and this is my favorite email I've received so far. Mr. Bouchard, can you tell me how many times you've been hit in the head with a golf ball? Only someone with a lot of concussions could be stupid enough to consider alternate facts and deny life-saving science. Crawl back under your rock with the rest of the UCP behind your hands. Signed, Jamie. At least I did the research. I do like golf. Our Calgary Law EPA is about having a real conversation. We refuse to be bullied and taken down by any law. Thank you to the Calgary Law Constituency Association. The dedication that we have is remarkable. Thank you all who bought a ticket, who are watching either here or via stream. Support has been incredible. And thank you to the courageous guest speakers for stepping up into this vulnerable position. We all deserve the truth. In Alberta, it's time to face the truth so we can move our beautiful province forward, strong and free. There's one more person I'd like to thank. We met nearly 3 years ago. Our mutual quest for answers and searching for the truth is what brought us together. He's become a great friend, and his relentless quest for answers is something to behold. He's also the president of the best constituency association in the province. Ladies and gentlemen, my buddy and great friend, Daryl Comic.
So some of you know, I just want to thank Eric Bouchard. Eric has taken so much abuse for the last 2 months just to bring you this event. You have no idea how much hate exists out there. And the tricky part about hate is it's propagated by fear. And so many people are afraid. And I understand fear. It was 3 years ago, I stood on the stage during the COVID lockdowns, and I said out loud in my own testimony, said, have no fear. And what we hope today that you take away, besides our call to action that we're going to give you, is your willingness to have no fear, to ask questions, but to ask a question, seek a question at a time. So we ask ourselves why. Why has there been a 350% increase in the number of unexplained deaths for children since 2020? Now, I have to start with an apology. If you know me, that's not like me. I was wrong. It's not 350%. We missed the decimal point. It's 3,380%. Yeah, but no one would have believed us if we said 333%. No one would believe that. That's 33 times the average. 33 times. So if I'm a medical professional, if I'm the government, and I see statistics, they live on polls. Why is it that something as painful as the number of unexplained deaths in Alberta goes unanswered? No one's asking questions. So we asked the question at Calgary Law Hearing. We're here tonight to try to give you some answers from science. This is not hearsay. This is not people making it up. This is not the 125 medical professionals in Edmonton who signed some sort of letter. If you've actually read that letter, it has 0 facts. And every time you run into a problem and you run into somebody who says that you are a truth denier, you have to realize it is them. It is not you. You come to a realization that you want to collect information, you want your mind to be open, you want to show love and respect. And that's what we're going to do here tonight. So thank you for being curious. Thank you to all those people in Grand Prairie, Wapiti, in Lloydminster, St. Paul, in Grand Center, in Kentucky. I know, Kentucky. It's global, it's international, it's so many people's hearts are open to the idea of asking questions. So when this is all over tonight, I'm going to come back and we have a call to action. And that action will involve everybody in this audience and the 6,000 people who are watching us streaming across the world. And with that, I want to introduce tonight's host, ladies and gentlemen, for the Sean Newman Show with the Sean Newman. Okay, I have one sole purpose of being up here tonight. A, it's great to see you all. I thank you for coming out on a Monday night, but my purpose is pretty much just to move the next speaker every single time, try and create it as smooth as humanly possible. Before we get there, I'm only going to say a couple of quick words. I just want to thank an MLA and the constituency for having the courage to put something on like this. I think we've all been waiting. That being said, we got 7 speakers tonight. We're going to try and have a hard stop for 8:40 p.m. That's not my design, that is their design. So I'm going to try and move them as fast as possible with getting the information we all know that they have to share tonight. We'll be putting their credentials on the screen so I don't have to come out here and go, our next speaker, he's XYZ, because you've probably all read it in your pamphlets. If you're one of the 6,000 people tuning in all over the world, they're going to put it up on the screen for you too. So I don't need to even get into all of that, which means it's time for Dr. Eric Payne. Please give him a warm welcome. Which means it's time for Dr. Thank you for that.
But my parents were watching Nautilus on the videos today. I want to thank my parents for city visitors. I want to thank Byram. There's a lot of people watching online, so I appreciate the opportunity. The lineup of speakers, very helpful. There's a lot of people watching. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity here. The lineup of speakers. We've got 14 minutes. Sean has told us that he's running a tight ship, so you get the first slide up here. Well, Sean has told us that he's running a tight ship, so I can see my time's running down there. Slide up here. So, the only reason I put up my credentials here is because over the last few weeks there's been a lot of attention. The only reason I put up my credentials here is because over the last few weeks people who have been bashing the event generally have been bashing speakers and don't want to engage in people discussion. But most recently they called us anti-science, gays don't want to engage in discussion. I've dedicated my entire life to science. I take care of children with neurological injury, epilepsy. I've dedicated my entire life to science. The idea that somehow anti-science is completely nonsense or critically ill in the ICU. So the idea that next slide anti-science is complete nonsense. Okay, it looks like that's about halfway through the presentation. But look how bad that is. But look how bad that is. There is a disclosure slide. I think it's number 2. Here it is. So, you know, I don't have any financial or academic conflicts of interest. As a matter of fact, it's been pretty good. I don't have any financial or academic conflicts of interest. Speaking of, you know, I do want to point out that, you know, I have been speaking relatively outspoken, you know, in the last few years. And this includes a letter to the college that's linked up here, all distance in Alberta, where I brought attention to the college vaccine and it's starting to worry about what these shots in kids might look like. That letter is still available. It led to some complaints for misinformation that are still open a few years later. I was fired from the Children's Hospital as a result of non-compliance with the vaccine mandate for about 6 weeks, and then they dropped the mandate. I'm now working in Calgary, still doing child neurology. I also spoke out about the nonsensicalness. It's very angry to think about the mask, the James masking in children. So I spoke about that. Sheila Annette Lewis was our lung transplant victim who was on the transplant list, but not allowed to get one because she refused the COVID vaccines, COVID genetic injections, and she has passed away since talking about this publicly. And I was involved with a Stop the Shots campaign with Katie Coulter Carolines. And finally, I was on Premier Smith. I had a task force, a COVID-19 task force, and I stepped away in November. But that was, you know, a very eye-opening experience, to say the least. Next slide, please. So this is, you know, a summary slide of the whole talk right here. You know, ultimately, these are the 3 central arguments for exposing our children to what absolutely remains an experimental genetic injection. Previously, I had called these things vaccines, but you know, to call these things vaccines is just not the truth. So first, they talked about the fact that kids need them, right? But the truth is that kids very rarely die from COVID, as you'll see, and as you guys already know. The Alberta data and the Canadian data also do the same thing. Kids do not transmit COVID readily to adults. So the idea that they were going to kill grandma through readily transmission, that was always a lie. The asymptomatic transmission, you know, upwards of 50% is what they told us initially. The reality is, it's less than 5%. There's an interesting story behind that. So if you're not sick, you don't have symptoms, generally speaking, you're not going to give it to anybody. And then, you know, it makes even less sense to expose them to this now that we have, you know, a big level of natural part immunity in the community. We actually know that if you have natural part immunity and you get exposed to the shot thereafter, especially if it's soon after, you might be increasing your risk of harm. Kids were told that they were going to kill their grandma, and this is obviously psychologically damaging. But the reality is, these things were never tested to stop transmission. We have multiple acknowledgements of this, and I'll show that. And they are proven to be safe and effective was the third argument up here, that this benefit really favors the COVID genetic injections. The reality is, these things are neither safe or effective, and more harmful to kids than COVID. Next slide, please. So we won't spend a lot of time on this one, but just to say that they changed the definition of vaccines in September 1st, 2021. They changed it from, you know, providing immunity to providing protection, which was, you know, in quotation, how you define this. And, you know, doesn't provide immunity. They don't have to provide immunity anymore. It's protection. Interestingly, as you'll hear, you know, a recent court case in the U.S. just decided that because these things don't try to stop transmission, maybe the insurance companies or the pharma companies are not liable, are not going to be able to hide behind the liability because these things did not stop transmission. They might not be vaccines, and they're going to continue down that road. So that might not be totally true in the next few months. We'll see. And ultimately, you know, this whistleblower case that was going through Bruce Jackson, a lot of you will know the details, but ultimately it went to court and it was dismissed. And it was dismissed because of basically 2 points. One, the court said, well, the FDA didn't know about the data now they do, and they still are approving this. And 2, the Department of Defense in the U.S. came up and said these things are not actually vaccines, they're countermeasures. And there's decades of legislation going through where they call these things countermeasures. And as a result of these things being countermeasures, they do highlight. As a result of these things being countermeasures, they're not safe. They're not subject to safety and efficacy trials. So the fact that Brooks Jackson was blowing the whistle on this didn't matter. It was a moot point. Next slide, please. So this is, the risk to children, and you can see here. This is the Canadian data. Exponentially increasing with time. Here's the summary. You've got 60.3% of deaths in over 80, 21%, 70 to 79. If you look at this, you can't see it very well, but then at this point in time in March 2022, there were 34 deaths with or from COVID in the Canadian database. And we know that more than half of those, at least half of those, have died with COVID and not from COVID. And here, this is the U.S. data summarizing. This is the child's infection fatality rate and survival rate. And in Alberta at this time, there were five deaths, and there were no deaths until October 2021. And these 5 deaths accumulated over the next few months, and it stayed pretty static. And as I'll talk about, know for a fact that many of these children died with COVID and not from COVID. Next slide. So this is the example here. So the first child who died with COVID, according to Dr. Hinshaw, who was our former Chief Medical Officer of Health, she ended up having to retract that after coming out and saying that parents, we just lost our first child. This was 20 months into the pandemic at that point. But it was also 2 weeks before they started pushing the shot in the 5 to 11-year-olds. And so what is mostly egregious, because to me at this time, how do you use a Chief Medical Officer of Health and not know that the child had stage 4 brain cancer, right? But it's even worse than that, because as Dr. Gray Chan, friend and colleague, testified in the National Citizen Inquiry, the coroner had already advised him to leave COVID off the death certificate because it had nothing to do with death. She chose to go through with that anyways, and it was only because the child's sister called her out on this that she retracted, right? So I would love to see if there's been a single healthy child in Canada that's actually died from COVID. I don't know if we even have that number in North America. Just an example of single. How many medically vulnerable children? We've got 5 deaths in Alberta among medically vulnerable children, and some of them, COVID had nothing to do with it. So we don't really know. The number is very, very low. Next slide, please. I put this up because recently they're trying to pretend that they never said these things. But here Janine Small, Pfizer executive, didn't know these things stop transmission. We were really moving into space science. Cecilia Lorenko, she signed off on these shots in Canada under Premier Becker, among other court cases with the JCCF regarding the constitutional inability for us to travel when vaccinated. During that trial, she acknowledged that she never considered that these things stop transmission because it was never one of the outcome measures. And then Anthony Housefather, Oliver Carlo, we were told these things didn't skip any tests, which was absurd. We had 2 months safety data at the time. And these are genetic products, so we should have had 12 to 15 years. We were told it didn't skip that. However, when he was pressed on this with respect to the fact that insurance companies have liability protection, he said, well, these companies said if you're going to deliver this product in a way that I've never tested in my normal way, I want to have different conditions. So that's why they needed liability protection. So, the lies that were coming down from the very top have been there from the beginning. Next slide, please. This poster was circulating at the Children's Hospital that I used to work at in the summer of 2021 and into the fall. And while I still face complaints for misinformation without particularization 2 years later, these were egregious lies at the time. You didn't have to really think too hard to know that these were lies, because these things were not 100% effective in the adults when they put this thing out. And the trials that they used looked at a clinical proxy for effect. So we give them the injection. We measure your blood to see if there's an immune response. There was no clinical trials to see if you did or didn't get these trials to get the disease. And so obviously that was never going to hold true. This one is blown up right over here. But right at this point, they're trying to tell parents that these things have been are safe long term, but that defies logic. And I can tell you that I call this misinformation because I have email correspondence with the patient, people pushing these posters at our hospital, acknowledging that they had 2 months adult data at the time that they were telling parents that this thing was safe long term. Next slide, please. So this is the Alberta data that went missing when it started looking really, really bad. But if you follow this with time, this is relative to vaccine status per 100,000 vaccinated patients. So in the red is the orange is the vaccinated. The orange here is the unvaccinated. So these were in the first couple of waves. Unvaccinated looked like they were catching COVID more. There were reasons for that for sure. And here, when the truckers were in Ottawa, Omicron, right over Christmas, you were twice as likely relative to vaccine status to get COVID if you had 2 shots. Then you follow this out until March 13th, and now the triple jab were the most likely relative to vaccine status to catch COVID. Alberta Health took this data down on March 13th, 2022. This data was the same in Ontario, the same in BC, the same in Manitoba, it's the same all over the place. And then one of our people proponents of this talk, Caulfield, suggested that it's patently ridiculous to suggesting things like efficacy and safety, to call into question the full of gravity. That has not aired well. He's got some conflicts of interest in himself. Next slide, please. So Omicron came through in the fall, and this is the start we started on. I told you about halfway through. We're actually probably more than that because we ran some time here. But this is a prospective study done out of Cleveland. And what you'll find here, so first of all, about 10 or 15% of their employees were not fired for their vaccine status because they had a placebo arm, as opposed to here in Alberta. But you can see a dose response curve. So you were most likely to get Omicron prospectively in the fall of 2022 if you had 3 shots. Next slide. And then they said, whoa, it still works against severe illness and death, right? Well, you just have to be watching what was happening in the UK and Israel to know that they were 3 months ahead of us, and that data was falling apart in the fall. So this is the data here in Alberta, June 27, 2022. 60% of those done with or from COVID were triple jabbed. 20% 2 doses. And the uptake on the 2 doses, as you know, in Alberta was about 80%. At this point, triple jabs were down to 30% drop. Next slide. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just to say, you can see in these graphs, this is Alberta group data that was taken down when attention was drawn to it. But in the days after injection, first injection and second injection, what you can see first is that this thing actually goes up. Cases goes up. Death, hospitalizations goes up before it goes down. So it has implications in terms of that definition of being vaccinated 2 weeks post your second shot. If you don't take that nonsense definition, the data, I think, flips in Alberta. And I would love to see that the task force has the data to be able to look at this and show this. Because in the UK, they've already been doing an investigation on this thing. And they've acknowledged that. They've got patients who died from COVID who were unvaccinated but had received the vaccine. So these data are fishy that way. Next slide. I'm going to take an extra 30 seconds because I got sort of late. Is that cool? We're going to stop on this one because I think just go on because I don't want to take anybody else's time. But this was, I thought, the only thing you needed to see to realize that we had no business. This is the next slide. No business giving these to children. This was Pfizer's own modeling data that they submitted to the FDA in the fall of 2021. So because, as I said, they used a clinical proxy for effectiveness, does the immune system go up when we inject this thing? They had to model out whether or not this was going to save any children's lives. And what they modeled, granting, that these guys always model in their favor, that if they gave 1 million children 2 shots, so 1 million children fully vaccinated with the first 2 shots, they were going to save maybe 1 kid. But they were going to cause 34 excess cases of myocarditis, ICU myocarditis, right? Next slide, please. So if you just look at all these papers, these are contemporary pre-COVID data from, what happens to kids when they're in the ICU for myocarditis? And what we know, if you look at all these samples across the board, at least 15% of these children die within 5 years. And some of these studies are up to 50%. So if you just do straight math, 37, 15, 20% of these kids die. Pfizer was predicting that they were going to kill 5 more patients from ICU myocarditis than they were going to save, right? And that's not the children who die on the way to ICU or in sports or in sleep, die from whatever other cause from the COVID jabs they got. And I'll leave it up to the last slide and get off the stage. Nobody wants my job. And it breaks my heart every time a doctor comes up and has to explain all their credentials, because it's like, you know, like they've just been attacked so vehemently for so long. You can hear it in Dr. Payne and the other ones that was speaking tonight. But besides that, let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Dr. David Speicher.
Just while we're waiting for David to get on, just in case you're joining us, we're live in Calgary with the Injection of Truth conference, and we know the sound is rough. We're doing what we can to sort it out, even from sending messages to there, and so we're working on it. So bear with us, and we will do our best to get better sound for you.
Canada, friends overseas and Ontario, it is a pleasure to be here. I am Dr. David Jeremiah Speicher. Yes, I stutter, but that's okay. I am not a left-wing anti-science conspiracy theorist. I have a PhD in virology. I look at the science. I have personally examined vials of these vaccines. I've got all of the traditional vaccines in me. I would never want this in me, because I know it's in it. Next slide. So, a year ago, Kevin McKernan discovered DNA in these vials and was told small sample size lab contamination, misinformation, and false. This here has been replicated worldwide, multiple labs, and my work on this is the largest study to date. Thank you. It was used earlier this year in Florida by Dr. Joseph Lastipo to call for a halt to these vaccines. And every government official worldwide should be doing the same thing if you follow the actual science. Next slide. So, what have we been told? Let's start there. Well, Health Canada have told us these vaccines only contain mRNA and a simple lipid nanoparticle. It remains at the site of injection. It is safe and effective. It does not contain DNA. And these will not enter our cells' nucleus. And these are fragmented and not biologically active, and are not associated with an increase in cancer. So on the right is what Health Canada says, CDC says, and after this talk, you'd be the judge on what is factual and what is misinformation. Next slide. So I have personally looked at 38 vials, 2 in Ontario, 3 in California, and now 3 in Australia. I have vials being shipped in now all over the world, I've looked at monovalent, bivalent, the Wuhan, and the new boosters, and they're all as bad. So, and these vials were unopened and intact. Next slide. So if we look at this by PCR, sure, it's just 4 nanograms per dose, but it is 186 billion copies per dose going through your body. If we look at this by the long metry, Pfizer averages 785, and Moderna is almost 3,000. Is this not above the guideline of 10 nanograms per dose? And Pfizer contains SB40 promoters and enhancers, not the whole virus. Things which are not good. And these DNA are inside the lipid nanoparticles. Next slide. So if we look at the regulatory guideline, it is supposed to be 10 nanograms per dose max, of the size of 200 base pairs max. And these approach those guidelines by PCR, exceed the guideline by far, by the largest fragment we found is 3.5 kilobase pairs in length, which is a little bit above 200. And there's no guidelines for mRNA, the vaccines, and these are all for DNA, the vaccine. Now, if we look on the right, on what is shown on the right bottom is what Pfizer disclosed to Health Canada. So this is what they disclosed. This is what we sequenced and found, and they did not inform Health Canada of the SB40 poly-A promoter or lithium AMPR gene. Next slide. So my work was published on October 19th at 3:30 a.m. 6 hours later, Epoch Times put this out. So they put this out, and Health Canada said the claims of SBD40 in there linked to a increased risk of cancer are unfounded. They also said Pfizer plasmid does not contain the sequences corresponding to the SB40 proteins. Therefore, the integral mechanisms as described are not applicable. January this year, on an order paper questions in the House of Commons in Ottawa, Colin Terry asked about the vaccine and was told by Health Canada on record the fragment is inactive, has no functional role, and is below the limit required. Well, A month ago, a FOIA was found and came out by on April 23rd, and Health Canada sent this email to Pfizer October 4th last year and asked for justification of the SV40 regulatory element, the size distribution, and what is in the file. So, Health Canada knows it's there, and yet said there's no functional role. Next slide. Well, follow the science, folks. David Dean, 1999. Okay? This paper here, next slide. Next slide. So, if you have DNA fragment with a 72 base pair repeat of a SBD40 enhancer, it facilitates maximal transport, and at times before cell division, as few as 3 to 10 copies per cell of cytoplasmically injected plasmid. What is the lipid nanoparticle doing? It is putting DNA and mRNA into our cytoplasm of our cells. In a dose, there's 187 billion copies. So it's a little bit above 3. And this may greatly increase their ability to be transported into the nucleus, especially in non-dividing cells. Health Canada knew the science, Pfizer knew of the science, and yet SBB40 is in these vaccines, and they say it's inactive. Next slide. Time to get up. So, earlier this year, a German team took off-target 3 cells over the vaccine overnight sequenced it, and found integration does occur in pre-cancerous genes in chromosome 9 and 12. Next slide. So integration is occurring. Is there any way for you to take off the unacceptable so people can read that? Because they use custom animation. There is or not? No. So custom animation doesn't work. So there is an increase of cancer, and so what I had here on the right is that in these vaccines, we know lipid nanoparticles and Speicher toxic. There is ribosomal frame shifting because of mRNA, and so those shorter proteins are Korean-like, and we'll go into the pain. They're lipid addicts. They're double-stranded RNA, DNA hybrids. A reverse ORF, which codes for spinroid proteins. So the more we look at this, the worse things we find. Next slide. So I'd like to leave you and say much of what we've been told is untrue about these vaccines. There's high DNA in there. There's all kinds of things which could cause harm. And so we need a moratorium on these vaccines. We need transparent and full consent with all scientific information available to the people that we need freedom of choice to get back or not without consequences. Scientists, we need access to vials to do research and things. Old vials are being destroyed, therefore evidence is being destroyed. And last, we need acknowledgement of testing, care, and support for all vaccinated. Our own government mandated these things. They told us to take them. They've harmed people, and we need to admit it, provide support and care for those people, and not just made. And so it's completely unacceptable. Knowing what is being done to make it. Next slide. All government officials worldwide, I leave you with a quote from William Wallace. There's a difference between us. You think the people of this country exist to provide you with your position. You are wrong. They are here to ensure we have the facts and have access to good health care, and have freedom in the choices that they make. And I go to make sure that they have it. Nice to be here, Calgary. Hello, Dr. David Speicher.
All right, we are making a switch over. We found a better stream, so we're going to switch over. That was Dr. David Speicher. I'm not sure who we're bringing up next. So just in case you're joining us, it is now 10 to 9, our normal broadcasting time. We're broadcasting live from Calgary, the Injection of Truth Conference.
Yes. So thank you to Sam and Dan for buying the party pass and inviting us to take part in the party pass so that we can share with you, our viewers, what's going on in Calgary, the Injection of Truth UCP conference. We've got Dr. Byram Bridle, Dr. Mark Trozzi, Dr. Makis, Dr. Jennifer Rose, and we just finished hearing from Dr. David Speicher. So we apologize if you were looking for us tonight and our voices, because you are going to hear from some very powerful speakers that know far more than we do about COVID, the injections, and what Canada knew beforehand going into, what we've discovered throughout, and what we now know going forward. So
all right, looks like we're ready to get going again with our new stream.
I thought I'm not
better.
going to talk about emergent. I'm going to talk about historical science, because I realize that Canadians have not had disclosed to them the reason why lipid nanoparticles were rolled out as a vaccine technology. Next slide. And you need to see this because it's quite remarkable. So, first of all, who am I? As you've seen, there's been many people. I can't believe the degree of emotional triggering that occurred from some people in this province over this event, just because we wanted to talk about science. It was incredible. So, who am I? So, I'm a viral immunologist and a Canadian academic who specializes in vaccinology for the promotion of human-focused health, despite your newspapers somehow claiming I'm a veterinarian. I don't have a DVM. I'm not a veterinarian. So for you, legacy media who refer to me as a veterinarian, that's outright lies. Well, how many lies does it take to be a liar? One. So there you go. We've already written you off and proven you, legacy media, to be liars. I stood against unscientific public health policies that promoted abuse of children. I will never be coerced into abusing my children, such as placing them in the equivalent of solitary confinement and trying to have medical officers of health somehow declare that this is isolated quarantine. I experienced the federal government's first ever censorship of a parliamentary press conference in the history of this country. And remarkably, it was a press conference about censorship. My concerns, for those of you who would accuse me of spreading misinformation, my concerns about COVID-19 have repeatedly been proven correct by primary scientific data. And for those of you who get emotionally triggered, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to stop telling the truth. Next slide. So this is remarkable, I find, and this is why I've gone back to history. So this is something that I teach my students when it comes to vaccinology. If you want to know how good or how bad a vaccine is, you have to place it into a context. Were you told that we have an official definition of an ideal vaccine? It's in the Canadian Immunization Guide, published by the Public Health Agency of Canada. Look at this. This is remarkable. This is our definition of a vaccine in Canada. A vaccine will be ideal. You see it right here. An ideal vaccine is effective, not in dampening the severity of a disease. It's effective in providing lifelong protection against disease. And this is incredibly important. After how many doses? You see that? 1 dose. So now put into context these COVID-19 shots, where people are up beyond 10 doses now. Next slide. Please remember this definition. It's very important. So when the old becomes new again, this is why I brought this up, because Canadians were not exposed to these facts. The rationale, the entire reason for the deployment of lipid nanoparticle encapsulated modified RNA vaccines was based on that definition of a vaccine. That is why they were deployed, for this purpose. All right, so Canada's COVID-19 shots, we have 3 of them. They're all based on lipid nanoparticles. Pfizer, Moderna, and Novavax, all based on lipid nanoparticles. Did you know that the lipid nanoparticle delivery system for modified RNAs was switched away from trying to administer drugs and gene therapies precisely because of the definition of an ideal vaccine? That is because it was well recognized that multi-dosing with lipid nanoparticles is dangerous. This is why the use of lipid nanoparticles to administer drug and gene therapies was abandoned by almost all big pharma, except the few that clung on to it. The hypothesis that drove the use of lipid nanoparticles as a vaccine delivery technology was that as little as a single dose would be needed if they in fact qualified as an ideal vaccine. I like to summarize this as the one and done concept. That's why you can remember it. 1 dose and you're protected from the disease for the rest of your life. That is how you overcome the toxicity of a technology that's toxic if you get more than 1 dose. You limit it to 1 dose. That's why they deployed it as a vaccine. Now, a lot of people out there are licking their chops and saying, look what Dr. Bridle just said. And where is the evidence? So next slide, please. I'm sorry, for all those who accuse me of spreading misinformation, you're going to have to talk to the peer-reviewed science, and you're going to have to talk to some of your best friends who push this narrative. This is an interview. The result of an interview that was published in 2016 when all the big pharma companies were speaking openly about this. Look at this. RNA molecules, they work better if they're wrapped up in a delivery mechanism such as nanoparticles made of lipids. Those are lipid nanoparticles. But those nanoparticles can lead to dangerous side effects. What? Especially if a patient has to take repeated doses over months or years. These are the big pharma companies telling you this. Novartis abandoned the related realm because of these concerns about toxicity. So did Merck, so did Roche. A lot of people don't realize Moderna, and it was the CEO of Moderna who was involved with this interview. They clung on to this technology. Big pharma companies looked at it and said, this is a disaster. This is toxic if we have to give multiple doses. We're banning it. We can't afford to kill people. Moderna couldn't afford that. They were a startup company. They were all in on this technology. You need to understand that. They had to find a way to deploy this technology or they would go under. They were all in. So let's see. What else did they say? It's highly risky. It's exceedingly hard to get RNA into cells without triggering nasty side effects. Next slide. Now, I don't know how many of you recall the name Dr. Catalin Cricchio. She's a co-recipient of the recent Nobel Prize for discovering this modified RNA technology, the pseudouridine molecules that make up the synthetic RNA, which Dr. Speicher already talked about. We've ended up, after she got the award, found out that this results in high levels of impurity because it results in misreading of the RNA and these fandangled proteins that don't exist in nature. But she has pushed this narrative. So again, those who would accuse me of spreading misinformation, this is one of your good buddies, got the Nobel Award to try and convince the world that this is some kind of great technology. So you're gonna have to talk to her about this, because what she said is mRNA is better suited for treatment for short duration, for the same reason, short duration, meaning minimal dosing, not for treating things like cancers where you have to give dose after dose after dose of chemotherapeutic drugs. All right, so treatment for short duration. So the toxicities caused by delivery materials are less likely to occur. Now look at this. Moderna's most advanced competitors, CureVac and BioNTech. CureVac's vaccine, modified RNA vaccine, failed in the trials. It simply was not good enough. Thank goodness it didn't get to market. But the one competitor, BioNTech, joined up with Pfizer. It's the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. They both recognize if they're going to survive, they got to make this technology work. So what did they decide to do? They experienced the same challenge with the mRNA, the toxicities with multi-dosing. Each is principally focused on vaccines for infectious disease, which the companies believe can be attacked with just a few doses, not 10 or more doses, not an unending number of doses. So do you understand? You need to understand. Every Canadian needs to understand the entire reason this lipid nanoparticle technology was deployed was because it was supposed to be a one and done technology, not 10 doses. You've heard from the big pharma companies themselves. Next. Okay, so there's multiple known toxicities. 3 different ingredients in these lipid nanoparticles can potentially cause anaphylactic or allergic reactions. Lipid nanoparticles can directly cause toxicity in various tissues, especially with repeated dosing, including toxicity in the lungs, the liver, and systemic toxicity. They're even toxic to cells of the immune system, the very cells of the immune system that we need to function in order to have a vaccine work properly. This is, as an immunologist and vaccinologist, I can tell you this is one of the many reasons why these things failed so horribly to function properly as vaccines. And my goodness, for those who would accuse us of spreading misinformation, look at this peer-reviewed, published science. My goodness, what are you going to do? More emotional triggering. Next slide. So there's no question, based on this, I'm putting out a call for a moratorium, period. It makes no sense for anybody when there are all of these open questions, let alone for children, which are on the extreme end of the risk-benefit analysis spectrum. A technological platform known to be toxic when multi-dose was deployed as a vaccine because vaccines are supposed to be one and done for lifetime protection. Despite this being settled science, you saw literally historically settled science among big pharma. Health and regulatory professionals have promoted repeated doses over months or years, a known recipe for toxicity. Pipelines of lipid nanoparticle-based vaccines are being established, further increasing exposure to lipid nanoparticles. If you didn't see it in the US, they've just approved a new vaccine, lipid nanoparticle-based mRNA vaccine, modified RNA vaccine for respiratory syncytial virus. So more doses of these lipid nanoparticles. And public health officials and legacy media now wonder why vaccine hesitancy is spiking, pun intended. Okay, because what I want to point out here, the public are left wondering why such serious concerns of toxicity due to multi-dosing was not disclosed to them. And now there's all these concerns about vaccine hesitancy growing. All right, and I just want to say I did my personal best as a vaccinologist to protect my field of vaccinology from this harm. So shame on all you who claim that events like this are driving vaccine hesitancy. Events like this are where the only few people are, where people can trust what we say about vaccines. So I would argue the onus is now on those who cause vaccine hesitancy, and that's the public health and government officials, legacy media, many physicians, pseudo-experts, etc., to earn public trust back, and it's not going to be easy for you. All right? And so at the end of the day, what science supports the ban of mRNA COVID jabs? Only one of many, many, many reasons that I could share with you is because expensive patented lipid nanoparticles known to be toxic were repurposed in a way that promotes their toxicity. And never forget, for comparison, cheap, off-patent human purpose drugs known to be exceptionally safe could not be repurposed. Think about that for a moment. Next slide. Now, before I go over this, I've got just a little bit of time. So I want to tell you something. This is very important. I just wrote a Substack article. Please look it up. I've just disclosed to the public, I just received behind-the-scenes communication through a Freedom of Information request obtained by a lawyer in British Columbia, showing behind-the-scenes discussions of the COVID-19 shots by the BC Centre for Disease Control, okay? And this is incredible because behind closed doors, I'm just gonna summarize it super quick here for you. Look at my Substack article. Behind closed doors, they did a comparison to the flu vaccine, which is awesome. I've said, as an expert witness in court cases, this is what we need to do. The public can't understand numbers coming out of these passive reporting systems that we have when it comes to side effects. So do direct comparisons with vaccines that we're aware of. So let me put this in the context of children. When it comes to COVID-19, COVID-19 is much less dangerous for children than the flu is. So there you go. You want to do your risk-benefit analysis? COVID is less dangerous than the flu for children. All right? Now, what they showed is that the COVID-19 vaccine, behind the scenes, when they were having their discussions at the BC Centers for Disease Control with Bonnie Henry, they showed that the COVID-19 vaccines were 16 times more dangerous than the flu shots. And then in this, it shows it very clearly in these communications that they had. When they released the data publicly, they removed all of the comparisons to the flu vaccine so that nobody could place the numbers into the context, into a proper context. Worse, they had listed the number of serious adverse events that they had pulled out of their system. When they went public, that they reported a fraction of those numbers, and we now know why. And then 1 week from when they looked at those numbers and when they reported them publicly, they redefined what a serious adverse event was. And they removed brutal, horrible disease conditions like inflammation of the brain. Are you telling me that's not serious? This is direct manipulation of data. It's failing to disclose important information to the public. And forget about the science. All those who say we spread misinformation, when our health regulators are lying to us and they're failing to disclose important information, that's all you need to know. All right, so, and I'm just gonna, I thought that was more important, so I'm just gonna summarize momentarily here. Mr. Timothy Caulfield and members of Alberta Health Services and all kinds of so-called experts were invited here. I came halfway across Canada to speak to you tonight. They were invited before I was. I came because I expected there to be a discussion, and they failed to show up. All right, and this is very important. And what I've listed here, and you can look later, I've outlined all kinds of reasons, the excuses that they use for not showing up. None of those excuses hold water. That's what I'm pointing out here, okay? And what I would contend is that legacy media's champions are not here because they lack expertise and or the weight of the science. And the legacy media and your champions, okay, who are so emotionally triggered, I say to legacy media, where are your champions? Why do they continually hide? You have to understand, a person can't claim to be the fastest runner in the world, but then refuse to compete with others who lay claim to that. If your team doesn't show up, you lose by default, okay? So I say to why don't you legacy media, you set the stage, you set the tone, you set the place, I'll show up. Why don't you host a debate between me and your beloved Mr. Timothy Caulfield? Thank you very much.
On fire. Did you hear that crowd cheering him on?
That's right. So yeah, so just in case you're just joining us now, you're fairly new to our 9 o'clock stream when we normally start. We are watching the Injection of Truth conference live. We're rebroadcasting from the Chris and Carrie show, and they were kind enough to share their stream out for us tonight. We kind of grabbed it.
Well, we had the party pass with Sam and Dan from Freedom Tour, and unfortunately the sound we were getting from our party pass was not great. We paid for a party pass and we weren't getting the close-ups on the clips and we weren't getting great sound.
But our friend Dr. Mark Trozzi is on right now.
25 years. I taught
we are
critical
on,
resuscitation
back
trauma
on.
medicine for a decade. Had an essentially spotless career and a good life and a nice house and a horse that I love to groom on Saturdays. That was my life until COVID. I was a frontline doctor in emergency, including a COVID designated site through 2020. And due to my inability of dancing and creating TikTok videos in the empty hospital, I researched. Thanks. I had 14-hour emergency shifts completely empty. And so as I prepared for the airborne Ebola that never showed up, I learned a lot. And the more I learned, the more I realized how wrong it all was. And one thing was obvious. I was in an empty hospital and my neighbors thought I was in a full hospital. And that was enough evidence to get us started. Near the end of 2020, before anyone was injected with this stuff that we've been talking about, I read the emergency use authorizations, as should have anyone making decisions like the head of a college, a minister of health. And if they had read the emergency use authorizations like myself, they would have said, that's not a vaccine. And this is a very bad and dangerous idea. So at the end of 2020, before realizing how disturbed things were, and before any of you or any of your friends or children were injected, I sat down everything I owned and my entire career and made it my mission to warn you. And that's what I've been doing since. And thanks. So, and I'm not allowed to use the word physician right now because my license has been revoked by a criminal organization, the CPSO, and I am proud of it. I'm also the recipient of the LifeSite News 2013 Medical Heroism Award. Thanks very much. Okay, enough about me. Let's talk about the science here. Can I have my first slide? So there you have it. There's a picture of coronaviruses. Before 1965, coronaviruses were a natural thing. They were one of the causes of the cold. Not a big deal. Everybody's had a cold. They were identified as a great platform for gain-of-function research, which I also call bioweapons research, because making viruses gain functions against humans doesn't seem like a nice thing to do. So when you look at a coronavirus, you see the sphere, you see all those red things sticking out. Those red things are the spike protein. The spike protein is how it attaches to cells to begin the process of infecting a cell. Now, if I took some of those, like Dr. Bridle would be an expert in doing, and I modified them, weakened them, fragmented them, and then injected those weakened virus or fragmented viruses into a person, a small number, that would be a vaccine. It would be a bad idea. It won't work for respiratory viruses. It would be a terrible idea for coronaviruses, but that would be a vaccine. As you're learning, it's not a vaccine, what they issued to us. Can I have the next slide? So here you can see, if you look on the top, you're seeing the surface of coronavirus. The red thing is the spike protein. The blue thing is the ACE2 receptor. And that's the most common receptor on the human cell where the ACE2 receptor binds, and that's where it begins the process of infecting the cell. Can I have my next slide? Okay, let's talk about these things that they're called vaccines, and the reason that the first video I ever published was this is not a vaccine. So on the left, you have the main one that we've been talking about. Now, what you're looking at is a pegylated lipid nanoparticle, which whatever you put in it will get into the cells. Normally, you inject something to someone that's foreign, your immune system will destroy it. It won't get into your cells, but pegylated nanoparticles are a delivery system. Whatever you put in them, they'll get into the cell. So what did they put into it? Well, what they told us they put into it, as you've learned from Dr. Speicher, they put some other stuff too. But what you're told was put into it was this modified messenger RNA carrying the genetic code for the spike protein of the man-made virus. Okay? And there on the other side, you see the other version where instead they delivered DNA for the same purpose in modified monkey adenoviruses. Does anybody want this in their kids? Me neither. Can we have the next slide? So that's why I put it up there as a Trojan horse. In other words, they put something in, it sneaks it into your cell, and surprise, it's Odysseus and the guys here to, kill the Trojans. Let's talk really briefly about how you go from chromosomes to proteins. Now, proteins, we think of protein as something we eat, and it's important to eat protein to get the parts to build our own proteins. The parts are amino acids. Your chromosomes, which live in the nucleus of your cell, chromosomes don't leave the nucleus. And they have massive length of genetic code all coiled up. And when you need to make a protein in your cell, it uncoils a special segment, a gene sequence, and then messenger RNA molecule is made that corresponds to it. Now that messenger RNA molecule then leaves the nucleus out into the main body of the cell, and there it attaches to the protein making machine called the ribosome. And the ribosome reads the sequence of the messenger RNA and assembles amino acids in the right sequence to make some cool protein, which could be a pump or a channel. They're literally machines, molecular machines. It's amazing stuff. God's done a great job. So that's what's supposed to happen in your body. So what were people given in these injections was pegylated nanoparticles that could get into the cell, carrying this highly modified, unnatural version of messenger RNA to make your ribosome make the most toxic part of the spike protein, or of the coronavirus, which is the spike protein. Now, as Dr. David Speicher pointed out as well, we've learned there's also DNA in there, a bunch of genetic sequences. We're still figuring out what some of they are. And included in that is that SV40 promoter sequence. And the SV40 promoter sequence helps the other DNA get into the nucleus and get integrated into your chromosome. That's called genetically modifying people. Nobody signed up for that when they got a safe and effective vaccine. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so I want to just talk briefly about mechanisms of injury. Now, any one of us here tonight could write 2 or 3 books on the subject. There's a lot. So I just want to look at some of the main ones. First of all, the spike protein. It's toxic. We knew that. That's old research. Polyethylene glycol. That's what's used to stabilize those lipid nanoparticles. That's toxic. 70% of people, if you get it into their body instead of in their digestive tract or on their hair, which is bad enough, they'll have an adverse immune response. Pegylated lipid nanoparticles, I think Dr. Bridle just did a pretty good job of explaining how toxic they are. Quasi-autoimmune disease, what am I meaning by that? When a human cell makes a foreign protein, and that foreign protein is on its surface, it no longer looks like a human cell. So what does your body do? It attacks it. And that's what you see in these kids' hearts. That's what you see in the aborted penises, the aborted placentas. That's what you see in the people with kidney failure, is that the tissue is marked with spike protein and the immune system attacks it like it would a foreign graft, like a transplanted organ. Why don't you hear about that in Canada? Well, you hear about it from us because no one is doing the proper pathology to reveal it. So like Dr. Cole said, if you don't look for it, you won't see it. It's easy to see. We've got lots of evidence of that. Go on my site, you can look at microscopic pictures. Antibody-dependent enhancement. Very common, especially with coronaviruses. What does that mean? Yes, when you get the body to produce a bunch of spike protein, your body will make antibodies against it. But guess what? Especially after a little while, and especially with coronaviruses, that antibody will help the virus infect the patient. It won't protect the patient. It helps the virus get past the innate immune system, and it helps it infect the immune system. So literally, you make antibodies that enhance the infection. Antibody-mediated selection and the golden rule. One golden rule of vaccinology is you never vaccinate your way out of a pandemic. Now, we could argue this wasn't a pandemic because the mortality rate laterally without the mandates wasn't high. But there was a very infectious virus spreading through the population. When you vaccinate into that situation, instead of you having a couple of month pandemic or a couple of month episode, getting herd immunity and getting on with your life, you drive the evolution of the virus. So what happens? You get one variant after another variant after. It's been 4 years. We're still getting new variants. Does anybody think that's normal? That's by violating the golden rule and antibody-mediated selection, driving the evolution of the virus. Immune system disturbances. Well, we could write a book on that. But the bottom line is you end up increasing all infections. Everybody's seeing the shingles. And you end up increasing cancers. And there's no question. Anybody know anybody with cancer since the jab? Sad. Blood clots. The modifications they made to the spike protein, both on their virus, Fauci's virus, and in the corresponding spike protein produced in our friends and neighbors who were injected with this stuff, they modified it. They eliminated something called hemagglutinin esterase. It's very fascinating. I've released a video and an article on it. The bottom line is that's one of the mechanisms why this virus, and especially this jab, which fills the blood, with spike protein is very good at causing blood clots. DNA contamination and SV40 sequences, we've covered that. That also has a big effect of disrupting tumor suppressor genes, which means another reason to get cancer. This thing has multiple ways to generate cancer. Ribosome frame shifting. Remember I said that messenger RNA wasn't a natural one? They modified it. One of the letters in the mRNA alphabet, instead of it being uridine, they made it N-methylpseudouridine. Bottom line is, it makes it hard for the ribosome to read it, and the ribosome screws up. So sometime it'll be producing the spike protein, and the ribosome will flipping around and going the other way, and it makes a, I don't know, protein. Or it can make little chunks of a protein and spit them out. So in addition to, probably about 95% producing spike protein, you end up producing a whole bunch of other chunks of proteins, who knows what proteins. That means that the person's immune system is at risk for developing an immunity against a similar protein in your body. And you do enough random stuff like that, you're triggering autoimmune diseases. And as you know, autoimmune disease off the roof. Of course, the doctor's still in the system. This isn't real. So therefore, they diagnose all the diseases, but not the cause. And more. And yeah, like I say, we could go on more, but just to give you an idea of a little reason why we're a little bit concerned about this injection. Could I have my next slide? So, probably seen this. Okay, the Canadian data has been a sham. I've written about that. I mean, Dr. Patrick Phillips and others who tried to report an adverse event lost their license. The events were rejected. So guess what? No adverse events in Canada. But how about reality? So here's the US VAERS data, an underreporting system. What you see here is from 1990, adverse events reports for all vaccines, for all diseases, all together. Well, what happens in 2021? Anybody see a problem? You go from 200 to 50,000. Could I have the next slide? And the same with death. And God bless Dan Hartman and what he's going through, and a lot of others are going through, whether it's their parents or their children or their loved ones or their wife or husband. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, remember we talked about antibody-dependent enhancement? It's going to make you more likely to get infections. Now, if you guys want to look at more of this, just type Romania, the presentation I gave to the Romanian Parliament in November. But just one piece of data. This is the Cleveland Clinic study published in April of 2023. And what you're looking at is the accumulation of COVID infection over time, and you've got 5 graphs. The bottom one, the black one, that's people that didn't take any of these shots. The next one is 1 shot, the next one is 2 shot, the next one is 3 shot, the next one is 4 shot. So what do you notice? Every shot makes you more likely to get sick with COVID. Now you'll see some data that shows, well, not for a little bit, but in the long run, yes. So sometimes you get a few months of protection, but in the long run, it's all downhill. And on average, it was 17%. Every shot boosted their risk of infection 17%. Now, I'll be honest, the adverse events, the blood clots, the cancers, and all their stuff is way worse than this. But think about it. Here you have an injection that has got a million ways to kill you, and it makes you more likely to get sick with COVID. Can I have my next slide? This is the heading of an article. You can see this isn't news. Dr. Paul Alexander and myself published this article in 2021. Children should be free and never COVID injected. Why? Well, let's look at it. Thank you. Amen. So I just want to explain a few of the reasons. Remember those ACE2 receptors? That's how the virus attaches to the cells. Well, COVID is a respiratory infection, generally an upper respiratory infection. Children have almost no ACE2 receptors in their upper respiratory system, which means the viruses can't grab on and infect them. It's very hard to infect a kid. But the beautiful thing is, enough of it happens for the kid to get exposed and for their innate immune system to adapt and evolve and develop real immunity, right? So kids were at 0 statistical risk of death or serious infection from COVID, at least if they didn't have any of this. So the strong innate immunity of kids is incredible. They come into this world ready with an innate immune system, especially a kid who's got a healthy mom that was breastfed and all this stuff. And that immune system needs to train, right? The pathogens in our world, they're evolving. And I'm not proposing evolution. Thanks God for the creation of life. But I'm saying evolution is a part of science. Things do evolve. So they need to meet the pathogens that are in their world when they're born. And then they need to synchronize them with themselves, their own immune system with those pathogens. And through our life, we keep up. If you block a kid from meeting SARS-CoV-2, you block that and you've committed what's called the original antigenic sin, an interesting word in science given that we're in a Scott here. Now, kids not getting sick, but getting the infection. Now, remember, there's a difference between getting the infection, in other words, being exposed to the virus, developing some immunity, and getting sick. So kids don't generally get sick, but they get immune. The more people that are immune, you develop herd immunity. It's a bit like a fire. You ever try to build a fire with wet wood? Doesn't work very good. What about one stick of wet wood? Well, maybe. What about two? The more wet wood, you get to a point where you can't light the fire even if there is some dry wood. So the truth was isolating people who were at risk voluntarily and letting everybody else go on with their life, especially the kids. Play in the park, get out in the sun, build your immune system. You develop herd immunity, and then granny's safe, even if she's on home oxygen with lung disease, because the infection's over. This would have been over in a few months, like it was in a Wuhan study that involved 10 million people 3 months after lockdown. And kids rarely transmit COVID. And this was a studies going back to 2020, where they said, well, geez, a couple of kids got COVID from the teachers, but they weren't very sick, but teachers didn't get COVID from the students. Isn't that interesting? Kids don't spread COVID. So we've been through a lot of lies. Can I have the next slide? Okay, this should break your heart if you thought the world was honest. So the UK child mortality data, and this is for the period of the 1st of January 2021 till the end of March 2022. Now, there were different age groups. Now, I've picked one of the worst ones, but I can tell you, I can't find an age group where it turned out to be a good idea. The elderly had a very high mortality rate from this injection. But let's just look at kids. This was specifically data from the 10 to 14th, and given our limited time, I didn't want to plaster you with an hour of data on this. But let's look at this. You see that green line, 0.33? Okay, that's UK data of the rate of COVID death per 100,000 kids between 10 and 14 that weren't injected. Then you go 1 injection, 2 injection. The red, that's the kids that got the full shots, 2 shots and a booster. Look at that, 300 times more likely to die of COVID. Here you have them, you know, about 90 times more likely to die of anything else. And here you have the overall death rate. So in other words, you take children 10 to 14 years old over that time period, per 100,000, you'll have 6.1 deaths among children that didn't have any of these injections, and 500. That's 82 times more likely to be dead in a year. Would anybody give your kid a shot if you got, you know, honest disclosure? Hey, we're going to give you a shot. It's not a vaccine. It's a genetic experiment. It's highly toxic. But your kid's at no risk from COVID. But I promise you this. Your kid is 82 times more likely to be dead than all the other kids if we give them 3 shots. That's real data. That was known by the end of 22. And that was predictable, which is why I launched this mission before anybody got a shot. Can we have the next slide? So this was the question that, one of the questions given to us, you know, the other doctors and scientists came here, which is, why are the unexplained deaths of children in Alberta up 350%? But as we just explained, it was a typo, it was over 3,000%. Well, I think I've answered one of those questions, the shots. But you know what? The mortality rate, unexplained deaths, was also up in 2020. And why was that? Because we destroyed their immune systems. Well, not destroyed, but we damaged their immune systems with the mandates. These kids should have been playing in the park, soaking in the sun, playing with each other. And that is why by the fall of 2020, so before the jabs were even rolled out, if you look at hospitalizations due to RSV, a different infection, not COVID, the hospitalizations in all the countries that were injected on average was up 700%. 7 times as many kids were so sick with RSV they're in hospitals. So the other thing is, why unexplained deaths? In other words, whatever your unexplained death in kids was up, that's not all the kids that died from this nonsense. That's the ones that were diagnosed as unexplained. Now, unexplained death wasn't really a diagnosis of significance until a few years ago, and then it became a leading cause. Well, why is that? Well, ask a doctor who tried to report an adverse event or an adverse death. Like myself, they had their licenses stripped and their reports rejected in this country, in Canada. So unexplained, that's a bit of a weak thing. But anyways, we certainly have plenty of reasons to know why more kids are dying and why there's more unexplained deaths and why there's more myocarditis deaths and everything else. They built stroke units for kids after these shots were rolled. You ever have a stroke unit for kids? And they said, the doctor's like, oh, well, I'm in the cult. I'm going along with it because I have to. Well, that's where we are. Can we have a look at the next slide? Okay, so let's just talk practically. I mean, we've got obviously a political disaster, and thank God for the UCP. Thank God for leaders like Eric Bouchard. And we all, and I know I'd be preaching to the converted here. We all need to take action, right? This is our generation. This is our time. These are kids. This is the future. Unfortunately, it happened now, and everybody's got a role to play in this war for our survival. But let's talk about what we should have done and what we should do. Everybody needs a healthy immune system. If you can remember that, new start, you're in business. Nutrition, exercise, water, hydration, sunshine, and of course the sunshine vitamin D. Temperance means exposure to hot and exposure to cold. You know why the Swiss would do saunas and then run in the snow? That's actually good for you. Finish your shower with cold water. It's good for you. Air, as in fresh air. Rest, as in sleep. And then trust. And the group that did this work before COVID meant trust in God. In other words, healthy spirituality. That's what our kids need, not genetic injections. And if I could flip to the last slide, but a lot of people have been injected with this stuff, and a lot of people are hurting. And the same scientists and doctors here that have been locked out of our hospitals, locked out of our labs, we're working hard on a variety of things, including how do we help? There's a lot of stuff we haven't figured out. It's very hard to know what to do about genetic modification of people and all these strange proteins. But the spike protein does a lot of the injury, and we've got a lot we can do with it. So one good starting place, you can go to my website, drtrozzi.org, or World Council for Health, or the FLCC, and type in the word detox, and make sure the kids that have been injected are getting help. Make sure your neighbors that have been injected are getting help. If you've been injected, don't wait for the symptoms. There are people that couldn't walk that can now, so there is help. And with that, I leave you, and I thank you very much for your time.
Wow, that was hot, Dr. Trozzi, and he
Dr.
stayed
Mark
on
Trozzi.
time.
Yeah, we have never gotten him to be able to stay on time ever.
His shows are always an hour and a half to 2 hours long. I love him.
Our next
He's live in
speaker is
person when we
Dr.
have him
Chris
speak at events.
Shoemaker. Please
Please
welcome him to the stage.
They're snappy with their introductions too. They don't go on forever. They just get them right on stage. So here's Dr. Chris Shoemaker coming up to the stage.
Yeah, I love how fast they're going. There is no rhetoric in between.
Okay, hi everybody.
I love it.
Here he is.
Well, I'm in the West. All right, this is good. And I'm ready to call this, after hearing Mark's wonderful words, conciliatory words, out to all of the Canadian public that he spoke. This is a conciliation tour. This is a tour of letting all of Alberta and all of Canada know that we want things to go right. We're here to help things go right. Please listen to us. Please read the studies, and please learn, and let's do better as a country. Thank you. I'm a quarter Albertan now because yesterday I came down to this lovely building when it was its primary function as a church, and I came to church here. And I didn't have a car, but I didn't mind a walk, and it was only 45 or 50 minutes, and I walked the McLeod Trail for 50 minutes and came to church. And it's great to be here. And part of what I've done is make speeches at one place or another, and certainly a fair number of interviews. And I think it's sometimes a good idea to give the feeling that, hey, you're in your living room at home, and what would it be like if we were watching Dr. Chris interview with Laura Lynn, Tyler Thompson? And what if he was telling Laura Lynn all about the hidden heart damage that was going on in our hearts, even when we're feeling well, even when we haven't been diagnosed by myocarditis. What is the jab actually doing to our physical body? And there's a study out of Japan from a Dr. Nakahara, and it's actually from 3 or 4 other centers. Anyway, in the short film, which you're just about to see, I'd like you to see me telling these facts to Laura Lynn. Please just concentrate on the screen and enjoy these facts, or, well, unfortunately, the right word isn't enjoy. Learn these facts from this interview. If we could have the first video, please. Emission tomography, positive emission tomography is used all the time to follow up for cancer patients. You're looking for metastases. You're looking for areas of the body where there might be a whole bunch of blackness, small, little, and sometimes large areas of blackness, which is lymph nodes overreacting or metastases going to parts of the body. And the way it shows up is that it takes up extra glucose into those metastases and shows you the danger that you're now getting into, because unfortunately the cancer treatment hasn't worked. That, in a general sense, is what PET scans are used for. In this instance, the doctors were actually a bit confused. They couldn't understand, well, why is the heart showing up black on our studies? The heart never has strange or extra glucose uptake. If you see in this study in front of us right now, there's 2 hearts to the left. Those are non-vaccinated people, and the heart is a soft gray in the middle of the chest. You can almost barely see it. It's not a whole lot different than the lung tissue or the arm tissue. It's a soft gray. You can see the liver just slightly darker gray below the heart. That's in the 2 pictures to the left, the unvaccinated. 2 vaccinated people out of the 700, and by the way, all 700 vaccinated people had hearts that looked like these 2 pictures on the right. The 2 pictures on the right are showing blackness, high level doubling of the amount of effort. In this in the one that's third over, it's 100% elevation and effort, 100%. The one to the far right is at about 50 to 60%. So it all gets graded out. If you look down to the larger efforts below, when you see just the heart being down in a semicircle, the dark redness or the dark blackness, that is a heart that is working 100%, twice as hard as it should, and it does it for 6 continuous months after 2 vaccinations. These people, by the way, Laura Lynn, were feeling perfectly well. They weren't having chest pain. They weren't having sense of myocarditis. They think that everything's just fine. They're an athlete. They're a child. They think everything's fine. Suddenly in month 4, this is the explanation. This is the reason that we all can see now that Dr. Nakahara out of Japan, and the study, by the way, was also done in 3 other centers, Houston, Texas, Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City, and Oxford University. Does that sound like a low-end group of studies? No. Oxford University, Mount Sinai in New York, Houston Hospital System, and the Okai Hospital System in Tokyo with Dr. Nakahara as the lead scientist. And once they had done the appropriate things to look, and it's a backwards looking study. You're looking back and you're trying to see, well, what's different? Why is one group got blackened out hearts, which never happens, and another group, and the difference was unvaccinated had normal soft gray hearts, no sign of extra effort. Vaccinated people, of which the 2 on the right are examples of, are blacked out or reddened out hearts, where the effort index and glucose uptake goes from 3 up to 5 to 6. Goes from 3 up to 5 to 6. That is a doubling or a 100% elevation. The overall average, to be fair, the overall average was 46 to 50%, but even 50% extra work for 6 straight months. Are you kidding me? Are we now surprised why that lady you spoke of at the beginning had an unexplained heart attack X months after her shot? The explanation is now in front of everybody. Yes, the explanation is in front of you. And if I could have the slide that is related to this, thank you so very much. Here it is in a still slide. This particular one, the third over, looks like a black horseshoe, and below it, it's done in a colorific sense. That red horseshoe is nucleide material being taken up into the heart in massive, massive amounts. And this massive increase, or even this one here on the right would be your average increase. That 50%, 46% increase would be showing up black and green in the far right. Notice how over here, No blackness, just paleness in the heart. That's what's normal sugar uptake. The heart doesn't normally metabolize sugar much. It uses microlipids and the like for its energy. And only a heart that is damaged chooses, or in fact has to, use glucose as an energy source because it's internally damaged. It's barely able to function. It does function, and it functions by using a nutrient that it normally doesn't use in this amount. And that nutrient is sugar. And those blackened bits are nucleide sugars called FDG, taken up 50 to 100% more than they ought to. And that's the reason for the sudden children dying at 16 running around on the soccer field, as their heart has been forced to work for a year and a half at an undiagnosable state, because their dear little heart was actually perfectly healthy before this all started, and it got ill because it was being immune-damaged and attacked by its own immune system. That's the actual story of how hyperimmune and immune attack of your own body. The body actually thinks that the heart is not your heart because there's spike in it, foreign spike, non-human spike. The body is fooled into thinking that it's not your heart anymore, and that's why it goes after it in that fashion. So, having told you that sad bit of very, very truthful science, and I invite any scientist to come up and discuss with me on that topic, because Dr. Nakahara's got it right. These 4 university centers don't have it wrong, do they? Not a chance. They've got it right, and the people who are denying it are the deniers. The people who are lying about it are the liars. They've been the liars from the beginning. I'd now like to take a moment to honor Sean and Dan Hartman. One more moment. I don't think the audience would mind seeing this speech in which Dan Hartman spoke with me at Old Toronto City Hall 2 years ago, September 1st, 2022. If we could start that second video, if that is possible, thank you very much. And I pass the microphone to my dear friend, Dan Hartman. God bless you, Dan.
Thank you, Dr. Chris.
Right on. Okay, right here,
My boy loved hockey. It was his whole life. He was playing ever since he was a little kid. It's all he ever thought about. It was his love and passion. To keep playing hockey, he had to get a vaccine. Sean's biggest fear in life was needles. He was terrified of them. And if he would have had the choice, he wouldn't have taken a needle. On August 25th, he got vaccinated. On August 29th, he went to the hospital, to emergency. He had brown circles around his eyes. He was vomiting, and a very sore shoulder and a rash. And the doctor sent him home with the medical equivalent of Advil. He didn't do a D-dimer test. He didn't do a troponin test. I filed a complaint against this doctor with the CPSO for not doing his job. 2 little blood tests that he could have done that might have saved my son's life. They found him not guilty. So he went to hockey on September 26th, went to play hockey with his friends. On the morning of September 27th, he was found dead on the floor beside his bed. My perfectly healthy son, who had no underlying conditions, was gone. They did an autopsy, and the cause of death was unascertained. Sorry, we don't know why he died. I want to know why my son isn't here. He was perfectly healthy. There was nothing wrong with him. He faced his biggest fear, which was needles, and it took his life. And I want someone to tell me the damn truth why my son isn't alive anymore. This man next to me has been a doctor for over 45 years. He's worked in emergency for 25 years. So when you needed his help, you went and saw a man like this. You trusted him. So now the world needs to trust what he's saying, because he's just trying to help. And that's what a doctor does. My days are absolute torture now. I just cry 15 times a day, and it's hard to even exist. I want the truth about these vaccines. Every other country in the world is admitting to vaccine deaths. not Canada. I haven't heard of one. Is that what we're going to do? We're just going to pretend it's not killing anybody? Really? If someone could say, I'm sorry, Mr. Hartman, your son died from the vaccine, then I can grieve my son. But not until that day.
Based on the medical history, I can say to you, your son was killed by the vaccine. Immediate symptoms within 48 hours of the shot, including symptoms of thrombosis or hemolysis, the marks under the eyes. Something was going on with his hematologic system, and the only thing that had happened was 48 hours before he got a toxic shot. I'm so sorry. We're here with you and with all the vaccine injured. Love to you all. Thank you, Dan. As you can see, I could barely talk myself at that point. And the stories are legion. The stories are tens of thousands across America and Canada as we speak. To our politicians, is it fair that we have stories like this one in the tens to 20s of thousands across America and Canada? And these are the ones that are well identified, and these are the ones where the parents are speaking up clearly. There are many other hidden deaths. As a doctor, I know death happens so easily. You have to be careful before you cross the street. You have to look both ways. The bus will take you out otherwise. You have to be careful with your nutrition and immune system. If you're not careful with your immune system, the immune system is the only thing that keeps the crap in your gut from winding its way up and getting to your brain 3 days later. It's not magic, it's perfection. We've got a perfected, wonderful immune system that will keep germ elements at bay 99.9% of the time. And we have abused that by allowing a genetic harm agent to go into our bodies. It was designed in parallel. Fauci sent the science over to Wuhan to develop the fake germ, but at the same time, parallel activity was going on in the United States to use the same genomes to develop the vaccine, and it occurred over 6 years. It was not Operation Warp Speed over 8 or 9 months when President Trump was in office. It was going on 4 or 5 years before he was in office, and he had no idea that this process was going on. Everyone was lied to. And I'm going to finish up in my last 4 or 5 minutes. I think that's what I have. Oh, wait a minute. Someone took me you took 3 minutes away from me. That's not fair. I'm just going to have, in 3 minutes, I'm going to talk about ivermectin. And I'm going to talk about ivermectin because ivermectin was known for 12 years. It was researched after SARS-CoV-1. It was researched in all the labs around the world. And the 3 things that came out from the DARPA, which is the research arm of the military in the States, and they say there were 3 agents that are ready to be used against the coronavirus that ever happens. And it was in print in 2009 and 2010. And it was in print that the 3 agents that would help marvelously were interferon, hydroxychloroquine, and the best of all was ivermectin. All the top scientists knew this fact. And the only way it got hidden is it was chosen to be hidden. These agents, which had been used for 40 to 45 years to keep people from suffering from malaria or succumbing to malaria, I prescribed hydroxychloroquine all the time to parents, to children, and they would go and they would come back from Vietnam or whatever, and they'd be perfectly fine. And the studies showed that these worked marvelously against any coronavirus infection. But they hid us. They wanted to call it horse paste. It was human medicine. It was used in humans for 12 years before the veterinarians asked for permission to use it for their horses and cows. Ivermectin was used for humans for 10 years before it was ever used in a veterinarian purpose. Its original purpose was to help with a river blindness syndrome in Africa. But it has other uses. It can mop up viruses as well as parasites. It does it beautifully. And it also, by the way, is part of the curative mechanisms for people who have neurologic injuries or seizures, or they can barely walk. Doctors who are being allowed to be doctors are prescribing it appropriately in certain settings in the States, and it should be everywhere right now. So I'm basically just going to finish up by saying to the Premier and to the wonderful people of the UCP party, do not be afraid. If I could have my last 3 slides, it will show you what we should be doing. Ban all COVID-19 spike protein generating mRNA shots immediately. They are causing immune toxicity and cardiotoxicity and the like. So that's why they have to disappear off the shelves tomorrow. Number 2, start regular availability of the ivermectin in all pharmacies starting July 1st. It'd be a wonderful thing to do. It's what we should do. Ivermectin saved 90% of the lives that were otherwise diseased. We lost 50,000 people here to COVID. We would only have lost 5,000 if we doctors had been allowed to prescribe ivermectin back in the early 2021 or 2020. We were banned from doing it. We were banned from talking about it. And the medical morons at the top have been nefarious. They've been harmful. They've harmed you. They've harmed your family. They want to harm your children. Don't worry, your kids basically don't need ivermectin because they get rid of it just without even needing it. But it's the adults that need the ivermectin. The adults are at risk of death if not treated in those first 3 or 4 days. I got my only case of COVID after 11 days after my second jab, but I had worked in a COVID clinic for 1.5 years, never once catching COVID, with no immunization, no shots in me whatsoever. At the very end of my time working in the clinic, I was coerced into the thought that I had to take it. I didn't know then what I know now. I didn't know it was human generated. I didn't know Fauci had done what he had done. But so I took my 2 jabs. And 11 days after my second jab, that was the only time I got COVID. And I saved my life by taking 3 days of ivermectin, and I felt perfectly fine on day 4. I never went near the ICU. So, with great thanks for the province of Alberta, which should take the stand and which should be like Canada's Florida. We should be Canada's Florida, and we should stop this first. Thank you, everybody.
Wow, Dr. Chris Shoemaker bringing it home.
Always on fire, always showing his past interviews as evidence.
Thanks, Dr. Shoemaker. Our next, we have 2 doctors left. I can see a few people checking their programs. We got 2 left, okay?
John Newman from
Next
Alberta.
up
He's
is
got a great
Dr.
podcast,
William
too. We've been
Makis.
on some roundtables with him as well.
Yeah. Podcasters working together tonight to bring you truth.
A great job of proving this through really quickly and not dragging it out and keeping his guys the time. Great
Thank
job.
you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, what a beautiful, beautiful welcome. Thank you so much. I wanted to thank the organizers of this event for putting on this incredible event despite all the hate from the mainstream media, all the hate from the medical associations like the Canadian Medical Association, the Alberta Medical Association, the Edmonton Zone Medical Staff Association, which is just a brand of the Alberta Medical Association, and all the doctors that have just spewed anger and hate and bitterness and have tried to silence parents who are trying to share stories of their vaccine-injured children. Shame on them. Shame on them. So thank you so much for this opportunity. This is a truly historic event, and I believe that it will be remembered as a turning point in an absolute nightmare of the past 4 years. My name is Dr. William Makis. I have been an Alberta physician for 11 years, and I have been fighting corruption at Alberta Health Services for 9 of those 11 years. I have the largest social media following of all doctors in Canada. I have 250,000 followers on social media. That's just a few short of Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. I have the top 5 medical Substack in the world alongside doctors like Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Robert Malone, Dr. Pierre Corey, Dr. Joseph Mercola. And I have about 20 million social media views every single month. And I tell you this, not to boast or not to be proud of this, but I tell you this because it's a miracle that I've actually been able to do that, because Alberta Health Services has spent over $5 million in legal fees trying to destroy me, my family,
try to shut down all my social media by fraudulent court applications, by bribing judges, and by threatening my family and threatening my kids, threatening us at our home, which they did as early as a few months ago. So it's a miracle that I'm here, and I am so happy to be here. I also have the most peer-reviewed publications on COVID-19 vaccine injuries of any doctor in Alberta. So all those Alberta doctors still pushing the mRNA vaccines on children, on pregnant women, I challenge you to an open debate in front of the media, anytime, any place. Next slide, please. So I'm always tasked with giving depressing news and presenting on depressing topics, but the cold, hard reality is that hundreds of Canadian children have died after taking Pfizer or Moderna COVID-19 vaccines. Now, the public doesn't know this because it's basically being covered up by absolutely everybody. Kids are dying, kids like 17-year-old Sean Hartman. You heard from his dad today. Kids that just wanted to play sports. They wanted to play hockey. They wanted to play football, basketball, gymnastics. These kids, many of these kids were mandated COVID-19 vaccines in 2021 just so they could continue playing sports. That was a crime for which no one to this date has been punished. So there are hundreds of dead Canadian children. I've reported many of them on my social media accounts, probably one of the reasons why AHS is trying to shut down my social media accounts. And no one wants to take responsibility for these dead children. No one wants to say, yes, we were responsible, we mandate these shots, we're gonna take responsibility. So everyone is covering it up. Health Canada is covering it up. Zero deaths from COVID-19 vaccines according to Health Canada. Canada's public health chief, Dr. Theresa Tam, covering it up. Alberta Health Services, covering it up. College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta, covering it up. Canadian Medical Association, covering it up. Heck, the Canadian Medical Association is covering up the sudden deaths of their own doctor members. Hundreds of Canadian doctors who have died suddenly or unexpectedly. Do you know what the Canadian Medical Association did so they could keep running Pfizer ads? They deleted over 1,000 entries of dead doctors from their website so Canadians couldn't compare how many doctors are dying now since the rollout of the vaccines compared to before the vaccines rolled out. That's the Canadian Medical Association. Did you know that the new Canadian Medical Association president, Dr. Josh Reimer, attacked this event? The Alberta Medical Association attacked this event. They want this shut down. They don't want anybody talking about it. And I understand. Nobody wants to talk about dead children. Can you go back to the previous slide? Hundreds of Canadian children are dead after taking Pfizer or Moderna COVID-19 vaccines. Globally, it's thousands of children. Thousands of children have died after taking the COVID-19 vaccines. I can tell you, I reported hundreds of them. In fact, in the US VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, there are 538 child deaths. 538. This is work done by Albert Benavides from VAERS Aware. He discovered a lot of these child deaths because the United States is hiding them. Do you know how they hide these child deaths in VAERS? They don't put the age in the age category. So when you search for child deaths, they don't come up. They just put the age in the description. No one can search for the description. He had to use advanced algorithms to discover most of these deaths. I've read most of those 538 VAERS reports of children dying after taking a Pfizer or Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. I've read them. And I challenge every single Alberta doctor who is still pushing these COVID-19 vaccines and saying they're safe and effective. Read at least some of those VAERS reports. Read them. These are perfectly healthy children who take a shot and they're dead 24 hours later, 48 hours later, 72 hours later. Cardiac arrest, cardiac arrest, cardiac arrest, blood clots. Read those 538 child deaths and then tell me that they are 538 coincidences. I dare you. I dare every single one of Alberta's 11,000 doctors to read those reports. They won't. They won't do it. Heck, they won't even tell their patients about any of the risks of the vaccines. Next slide. The World Health Organization, from the VG Access report, tells us that there are 200,000 deaths, 200,000 injuries that have been reported from COVID-19 vaccines, 200,000 pediatric injuries. And 65% of them are girls. We even have publications, peer-reviewed publications of at least 4 child deaths. Next. There are very serious adverse events where kids require transplants, for example. Liver transplants, heart transplants, lung transplants. Doctors are not allowed by the colleges to tell parents about these risks. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith said, we give the choice to Alberta parents. That is incorrect. What kind of choice is it when you're not informed about the risks as a parent? That's not a choice. That's not informed consent. Next. Cancer is going to be the big one. There are 3.1 million Canadian children who've been injected with at least one COVID-19 vaccine, and I'm telling you that all of those kids have an increased risk of cancer long-term. Leukemias, lymphomas, sarcomas, brain tumors. I'm seeing a lot of vaccinated kids starting to come down with these cancers. They're called turbo cancers. We're seeing them in adults, many adults, but they're starting to happen in kids. These kids now have an elevated risk of cancer for the rest of their lives. Next. So who's responsible for putting these toxic products on the Alberta childhood vaccine schedule? Well, we have one of the most corrupt health institutions in Canada, perhaps in North America. It's called Alberta Health Services. And since 2015, it has been run by leftist bureaucrats installed by Rachel Notley and Sarah Hoffman, who've been paying them $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 to basically mismanage a $23 billion budget and execute a leftist agenda. These people are all allied to Justin Trudeau. And so Jason Kenney came in and he did absolutely nothing. He rolled over and he let them run AHS the entire time. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith fired the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Francois Bélanger, who is responsible for all the medical decisions. Hang on. It was one of the most important decisions in Alberta's healthcare system. It wasn't widely publicized. This is the person responsible for signing a deal with the World Economic Forum in 2020, for blocking all early treatments like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine in 2020. So he and Verna Yu are responsible for 5,800 Alberta deaths. They're also responsible for implementing an illegal vaccine mandate on Alberta's 105,000 healthcare workers, blocking informed consent so that they don't allow informed consent. They don't allow vaccine injury reports. So all vaccine injury reports are being blocked at AHS. They never make it to Health Canada, as you heard earlier. And they basically put the vaccines on the childhood schedule for babies as young as 6 months old with no informed consent. Now, when he was fired, AHS was rattled. I knew because I'm in contact with AHS lawyers all the time. I knew they were rattled. Something was wrong. So I thought, okay, finally. It took him about a month or two to reorganize, and he put his buddies in charge of every single important AHS position, and we're back to AHS being run by NDP as if nothing happened. Next. This is the AHS organizational structure. Look at these positions, look at these executives. The blue are the medical decision makers in Alberta. And I've given you the years. They are NDP allies, and they started making millions of dollars as NDP bureaucrats in 2015, 2017. We still have 90% of the top positions by AHS occupied by NDP. Now, we do have one token Kenney staffer who was given a position kind of in the corner there, not an important position, but otherwise our entire healthcare system is run by NDP. Next. Now we come to the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta. The college has committed very serious crimes during the pandemic. But some of the crimes you wouldn't even think of, because You don't hear about it on the media. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the college protected or gave back licenses to individuals, doctors who sexually assaulted children as young as 5 years old. Let me give you an example. Dr. Fred Janke, arrested by RCMP in 2018. He was Rachel Notley's bureaucrat. He was the president of the Alberta College of Family Physicians. He was trying to traffic a 5-year-old girl from British Columbia to sexually assault and make child pornography with. He was arrested. He was in 2018, let go in 2020. In 2021, the college gave him his license back on a silver platter and gave him access to Alberta's children. And he continued to have access to Alberta's children until his retirement, peaceful retirement in 2023. First example. Next example, Edmonton pediatrician Dr. Ghassan Al-Nami was caught at the Edmonton airport, arrested by RCMP with child pornography in 2019 of a 6-year-old girl being raped by an adult. 2 years later, the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta gave him back his medical license on a silver platter, gave him access to Alberta's children. Okay? This is what the college is doing. They're giving pedophiles access to Alberta's children, and they're sabotaging honest, hardworking doctors who are just trying to protect their COVID patients. Next example, last example I'll give you is Dr. Albert Devilliers, an AHS executive who was sexually assaulting a 7-year-old boy. This was under Rachel Notley's government. When these stories came out, 2 weeks later, Rachel Notley announced her retirement from politics. Do you wonder why she retired from politics? I don't. When these stories started coming out, Rachel Notley announced her retirement, stepping down, retiring from politics. Albert Devilliers was handpicked by Rachel Notley and Sarah Hoffman to be their pediatrics lead. He has no pediatrics training. He was their pediatrics lead. I guess they chose him to give him access to Alberta's children. Sexually assaulting children, he's now in prison for 5.5 year prison sentence that he's serving. He was in court last summer. Do you know what he did? He came with 28 letters of reference from AHS executives and college officials who said he's a good man and were telling the judge to keep him out of jail. And these people are still in their positions of power at AHS and the college. Next slide. So basically, these are the doctors that are being persecuted by the college today. Last month, the college was supposed to drag Dr. Roger Hodkinson through a hearing. The college raided the offices of Dr. Daniel Botha because a lawyer, Jeffrey Rath, was suing AHS and the college, so the college raided his family doctor so they could get access to the lawyer's personal medical records. This is a kind of criminality we've never seen in Alberta before. This is open criminality being engaged in by an institution responsible for 11,000 medical licenses of Alberta doctors. They're going after Dr. Eric Payne. They're going after Dr. Gary Davidson, Dr. Dennis Modry, Dr. Daniel Nagasi, Dr. Gregory Chan, and myself. They threatened my family just a few months ago at our house. So these are the corrupt institutions that want to jab your children as young as 6 months old, up to every 3 months if possible, because they're the ones being protected by the pharmaceutical industry. They serve the interests of the pharmaceutical industry, not you. That has to change. That's unacceptable. Albertans deserve better. Next slide. And I just wanted to point out some of the people who are trying to shut down this conference so that people, so that us speakers, we would be silenced, so that you wouldn't hear any of this information. Luann Metz, Dr. Luann Metz is an NDP MLA. She sabotaged Alberta's hydroxychloroquine trial that would have allowed 1,600 COVID patients access to life-saving medication. She has blood on her hands. She has the blood of 1,600 Albertans on her hands. She shut it down because of the LancetGate fraud, a fraudulent paper published on Lancet, and she didn't restart the trial. She was told by the WHO to kill the trial. She killed it, never restarted it. She called in the Alberta legislature for this event to be shut down. She asked Danielle Smith to shut this event down. That woman should have never been allowed to run for government, let alone be in government. And then we have Timothy Caulfield, who is in bed, who has received millions of dollars from the Trudeau government to push vaccines and to attack anyone who raises concerns about the vaccine injuries, and so on. He's received millions of dollars. And as you can see, he's very cozy with the two presidents of the Canadian Medical Association that has been covering up the deaths of Canadian doctors who've died suddenly after taking the COVID-19 vaccines. These are the kinds of people that we're up against. These are the people that are defaming and smearing us. Next. So in conclusion, I am calling for the immediate halt of COVID-19 vaccines in children of all ages, in pregnant women. And if it was up to me, I would halt it immediately, absolutely, for everybody. No one is benefiting from these shots. Nobody. But the least we can do is protect Alberta's children. I mean, that's the least we can do. I'm calling for all my Canadian physician colleagues to wake up and start abiding by your Hippocratic oath to do no harm. AHS leadership should be terminated. And I'm telling you, the new AHS CEO is no better. She was an executive for the Alberta Medical Association who tried to shut this event down. We finally need a cleanup of AHS. Enough games. You can't tell me that conservatives can't find administrators to properly administer a healthcare system and that they keep having to rely on recycled NDP con artists and criminals. And finally, the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta should be dissolved. We need a new medical board that is answerable to Albertans. They have failed in their duties and responsibilities to Albertans. And you know what? If we can't dissolve the college, then let's at least rename the college. Let's rename the College of Pedophiles and Child Sex Abusers of Alberta. That way, they can keep their letters CPSA, and it'll be much more, indicative of what they've been doing for the last 4 years. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Wow, yes, he killed it and called out those pedophiles and criminals. I love it.
Yeah, now on to BC.
Everybody's gonna have to forgive me. I said two
Never mind,
speakers, and
all
then I had
across
to go back and
Canada,
stare at a lawyer
these
who I forgot to
criminals
mention was
need to
gonna
be put
speak.
behind
So
bars
that's,
and lose their job.
you can imagine his eyes when I walked around the corner. We have two speakers left.
Wow.
Sorry, Jeff, wherever you're hiding.
I love this.
Our next one is not on stage. She's zooming in. I think a lot of us in the crowd know Dr. Jessica Rose.
I hope.
Well, I mean, it's all over YouTube. It's all over Rumble.
And
it's
Twitter.
all over Twitter. So, Dr. Jessica Rose.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me now. My name is Jessica Rose, and I'm going to take a very short amount of time today to present some information and to try to answer the question, does science support banning of modified mRNA lipid nanoparticle-based products? I'm going to describe a little bit about the insincerity of the pathway to the mass injection program and the science behind the contents of the vials only with respect to DNA contamination, which is also linked to N1-methylpseudouridine replacement. I'm not going to talk about frame shifting or the codon optimization, the mRNA misfolding, double-stranded DNA or RNA, the double-stranded RNA or lipid nanoparticle technology, but bear in mind that these are all problems as well with this platform.
Looks like they're having some technical issues with Dr. Jessica Rose. Hopefully they could get this worked out. I'm sure she's got some really great information to share.
It was going really perfectly until then. It never goes perfectly. So, I mean, you had to have something.
This always happens though when you have people remotely calling in. Hopefully they can get it figured out quickly and bring up her slides and get her going again.
Yeah, I'm sure the techs are freaking out right about now. I've been in this situation. It sucks.
Hello, can anybody hear me?
There we go. Sounds like they got
I'm
her.
waiting for the chat window to respond.
Uh-oh.
All right, I guess you guys can hear me. So I have about 10 minutes to inject you with as much information as I can. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to try to answer the question that was in the promo video, does science support banning of modified mRNA lipid nanoparticle-based products? And I'm going to just briefly mention why the pathway to the mass COVID-19 products was insincere, and the science behind the contents of the vials only with respect to DNA contamination, which isn't supposed to be an issue in the first place. I will not discuss any of these other issues that are pending with this platform. I want to go right back to the beginning of the Pfizer clinical trial number here, and remind everyone of something extraordinarily important about how long it's meant to take to get a vaccine to market. Now, these are conventional vaccines I'm referring to, shown on this timeline. It takes about 5 to 15 years for a traditional vaccine or a conventional vaccine to get to market. And this is for a very good reason, because we have specific and distinct phases that are not meant to be overlapped, that take specific amounts of time as per the protocol, right up until FDA approval and pharmacovigilance is done. So this was reduced to 10 months. And this is in the context of 2 brand new technologies: the modified mRNA, which is modified with N1-methylpseudouridine swapped out for the uracils, and the lipid nanoparticle-based technology, which has ionizable cationic lipids. This has known toxicity in its profile. And just so that, this isn't a PowerPoint presentation per se, that's a shame. Just so that everybody knows, I'm sorry you can't see what's underneath this window here, but instead of a 2-year follow-up for this trial, which didn't happen, following a 2-month follow-up, the participants that were in the placebo group were unblinded and offered the injection. Now, what this effectively does to a randomized placebo-controlled trial is destroy it. You cannot make conclusions from the data therein after doing so. So all in all, in brief, the genuine safety testing wasn't possible in the Operation Warp Speed timeline. It just wasn't. And the placebo group was intentionally lost, which effectively destroys the trial. The DNA that was used to produce the modified mRNA, as per the ingredient, the primary ingredient wrapped in the lipid nanoparticle for injection, was made with something called a process 1 manufacturing procedure, which required the use of PCR, polymerase chain reaction, to produce the DNA for production of the modified mRNA. The commercial batches that went into people's arms were made with a different manufacturing process called process 2, whereby a plasmid, which is a circular DNA, E. coli system was used. So the DNA is synthesized, put into the E. coli bacteria, and the power of the doubling time of the bacteria, the fast growing time of the bacteria is exploited. So as the bacteria grows and doubles every 20 seconds, you have more and more and more and more and more DNA, which you can then linearize, use in vitro transcription and T7 polymerase to convert to your mRNA. And in this case, you add in N1-methylpseudouridines to produce your modified mRNA, and then you're supposed to clean out the final product using a DNA so that you degrade all your DNA that is remaining. Now, what we think happened, as you'll see in the next slide, is that a lot of DNA was left behind, which means it wasn't cleaned thoroughly at the end of the process. And one of the ways that this might have happened is by the formation of DNA and RNA hybrids. This is something that happens in nature. It's not new to this procedure at all. And our body has mechanisms to remove these and to get rid of what we call R-loop accumulation, which are the introns that get excised out from the DNA when these hybrids form. But if you have R-loop accumulation by introducing massive amounts of these via a lipid nanoparticle, for example, into a cell, you can initiate a number of disease pathways such as cancer. This is a shame. I'm sorry that you can't see these as a PowerPoint presentation, but I guess the references are good enough. The DNA has been found in a number of vials, and this is very important. The results were reproduced, initially found by Kevin McKernan in his lab at Medicinal Genomics, reproduced in labs around the world, including in Canada by David Speicher. And he's tested the most vials. Currently, I think he's at 32. And in addition to finding DNA, which isn't supposed to be there in the first place, it was over the EMA limits, the commercial acceptance criterion. This is very important, or it's very important to note that these criteria are already too high because they were set in the context of naked DNA, not lipid nanoparticle encapsulated DNA. And of the first vials tested by Kevin McKernan, about a third of the nucleotides were found to be DNA. This is extraordinarily bad. The regulatory agencies, Health Canada, FDA, EMA, probably the TGA in Australia as well, are well aware of this contamination because of our work. And we know this by FOIA requests from citizen journalists. And one of these DNAs is called the SV40 enhancer promoter. And the claim from these regulators, having learned of the presence of this DNA, is that it's not a problem because they're not functional. Now, I have three things to say about. One, they are functional. They're actually gene therapy tools called nuclear localization sequences. This is well known, well established in the literature. That means that they have a very efficient ability to traffic, specifically plasmid DNAs, to the nucleus of cells. Two, they weren't disclosed in the Pfizer original plasmid, which is very suspect. And three, they don't have a reason. There's no reason for them to be there. These are meant for mammalian systems. This was known, the DNA issue was known back in 2021. We know this because of leaked documents and FOIA requests. So this just proves that they have known about the problem and they have been trying to mitigate it, but not with much success, because one of the recent batches tested by David Speicher, this XBB vial, also contains levels of DNA over the so-called EMA limits. The Surgeon General of Florida, which is no lackey position, actually has used our data to call for a moratorium on this modified mRNA technology. This data is going to be published in the literature soon. It's a preprint for now. And it's very important to compare this to what we're seeing in pharmacovigilance databases, because this is the last step usually to FDA, or after approval, we have to monitor whether or not we're seeing adverse event occurrences. That's what pharmacovigilance databases are for. This is the vaccine adverse event reporting system in the United States. And it's very important everybody know that foreign lipid nanoparticle introduced DNA could lead to oncogenesis. This is known. This is not something I'm just saying. This is not new in this context. This is known. This is why we test for the presence of DNA in products that might carry it for manufacturing. So this is the cancer signal that's arising from VAERS, starting from, in the context of the COVID products, starting from 2021. And previously, from 2018 through 2020, this is for the cancer signal for all vaccines combined. So you can see there wasn't much of a rise in the signal from between 2020 and 2021. But what's concerning is that there's a continuing rise after that. And this is even more significant when you consider the fact that the shot administration is going down. And on the right is the exact same plot and effect for the Moderna products. And these are normalized against the total number of adverse events in the database. This is exactly the same concept with just a more striking profile for breast cancer specifically. And you can see that on the left here, that there is more of a striking contrast between 2020 and 2021, which has yet to be explained. And these reports are on the rise despite lowering numbers of administrated product. Getting back to Canada, in the US VAERS database, there are 8,348 reports originating from Canada. And of these, getting back to children, there are 117 reports for children ages 0 through 12. I just randomly picked 0 through 12. And remember that the younger children didn't start being injected until later. So these numbers, to me, any number would be significant. This, to me, is a lot of children to have been reporting, pardon me, especially in the context of the timing. So as you can see here, 54% of these reports were filed immediately. This is as per, say, an anaphylactic reaction. 64% were filed within 24 hours, and 68% were filed within 48 hours. This is important to consider because the way that we determine a cause-effect relationship from epidemiological data, which this is using something called the Bradford-Hill criteria. There's 10 of them. One of them is temporality. So in order to have a cause-effect relationship, you have to have something come before something else. And the shorter the time frame between those two things makes it more likely that there's a cause-effect relationship. So nobody would refute that if somebody got an injection and suffered an anaphylactic reaction within, say, 10, 15 minutes, that shot didn't cause that reaction. Am I correct? So that's what we're talking about here. 44% of these were considered to be serious adverse events. Now that includes death, hospitalization, life-threatening illness, birth defect, an emergency room visit, or a debilitating condition imposed. It's very important that everybody know that the upper limit for a serious adverse event percentage within any adverse event set of data is 15, 1-5. So this is almost 3 times the upper limit of what's acceptable, let's say, for the percentage of serious adverse events in any database. One of these reports was made for a 6-month-old baby who died. You can see the agency number and the VAERS ID here if you want to confirm this. And disturbingly, this baby went into shock and they just had no pulse quite quickly. And there was no autopsy done, and there was no causality assessment provided. And even the agency, the reporting agency, considered this to be medically significant. I'm not sure anybody wouldn't consider this medically significant because we were talking about a healthy baby prior to this. Has anyone heard of this? I hadn't before I looked into the data. So to answer our question, I forgot to set my timer. I'm sure I'm on time. Based on the lack of transparency, reliability, and consistency demonstrated by the regulators, the trials, and the so-called authorities, the lack of true understanding of the mechanisms of action of this platform and the lipid nanoparticle technology, and I really do mean that, there's nowhere in the literature where you can actually find a statement that says exactly how the lipid nanoparticle, the ionizable cationic lipid, works to reveal the contents therein, the negatively charged genetic material, for example. We think we know, but nobody actually knows. The associated safety signals emanating from pharmacovigilance databases, not just VAERS, the yellow card system, the UDR system, the Dane system, South African VAERS, all of these are showing the exact same profiles. An increase in signal, dramatic increase in 2021 for no explainable reason, and a multitude of types of adverse events that were not seen historically. There's actually 6.2 times more types of adverse events being reported in VAERS in the context of the COVID-19 products when you compare to all vaccines combined for the past 30 years. And the inherent dangers associated with the platform. And I'll add here that there's no safety data on the lipid nanoparticles as empty platforms. It's difficult because these packages they're a unit, and the positively and the negatively charged molecules. So in my expert opinion, I think the answer is a simple yes. And if I want to play devil's advocate with myself, yes, at least until, okay? This is what we need to do. I always throw this slide in at the end of my presentations because it's very important to remember that there are real people, this is why I'm doing this, who are facing real problems right now, and we need to help them first and foremost, even before we hold people accountable, which also needs to happen. And we need to remember that these decisions that we make about our bodies, the autonomy of our bodies, they're our decisions. No one can make you do anything. I really want everyone to remember that, because when this happens again, and I promise you it's going to happen again, they're going to try, you just have to say no. It's very simple. You do not have to take any kind of medical product or undergo a medical procedure if you don't want to. And it's that simple. And this is where you can find my work. I'm very grateful for having the opportunity to speak, and I apologize for not having enough time to tell you more.
We have one final speaker, Barrister Jeff Rath.
Good evening. Are we all united conservatives? I am so proud to be here in a room of united conservatives. We united together to throw Jason Kenney out on his ass when he trampled our freedoms and our civil liberties. We united together during the last election to elect Danielle Smith as our premier. And some of us that lived in the right constituencies united together to stay home on the couch and make sure that Jason Copping and Tyler Shandro were not reelected. That's what we have to keep in mind, is that when we unite together and we work together, we can solve the problems that are facing us. Right now, as some of you are aware, my office is currently acting on 2 separate class action lawsuits. One of them protecting the rights of business owners who are illegally shut down by Dina Hinshaw's illegal ultra vires public health orders that were issued throughout the pandemic. The second action, I am proud to say that we are representing Carrie Sakamoto with regard to the horrible injuries that she suffered as a result of following Dina Hinshaw's negligent medical advice to follow an AstraZeneca shot with a Pfizer shot and then a Moderna shot, because according to Dina Hinshaw, this untested vaccine cocktail / buffet was safe and effective. And of course, as we're hearing tonight, I'd like all of us to consider the fact that we need to stop using the word vaccines in conjunction with what I think are should be appropriately referred to now as experimental genetic therapeutics. These are not vaccines. That's one of the big takeaways that we should be taking out of this presentation tonight from all of the excellent speakers that have preceded me. It is clear when you look at the slides that were presented, these experimental genetic therapeutics are killing more people than COVID. It's certainly true in the context of children that these shots have killed more children than COVID. It's uncontrovertible. What's even worse is that this was known or was predictable from the outset. So I know this is a bit of a memory test for some of us. And it's like, can you remember what was said during the very first presentation by Eric Payne? But that one slide that he put up, the Pfizer EUA table, right, that showed that Pfizer notionally claimed that their experimental genetic therapeutic would save 1 child per million from COVID, while putting, and this is a disgusting number, 34 children per million Pfizer admitted they were going to put into hospital with not just hospital, ICU with myocarditis. Okay, so anybody that knows, and Eric was referring to that, if you put 34 kids into hospital with myocarditis, as many as 10 of them are going to die. So Pfizer's own data indicated that the vaccines, or I'm sorry, the experimental genetic therapeutics that they're selling the government were as much as 1,000% more likely to kill children than COVID. So let that sink in. And I want everybody in this room to know that when that table was in my hands prior to that, to the rollout of the childhood vaccines, I sent a copy of that table to Prime Minister Trudeau. I sent it to Theresa Tam. I sent it to Jason Kenney. I sent it to Dina Hinshaw. And I said, look, you know, this is Pfizer's own data. If you roll this out for children, you're going to be killing more kids than COVID. Don't do it. Please don't do it. I'm putting you on notice not to do it. Well, what did they do? They did it. And not only did Dina Hinshaw do it, she lied about it. You know, if we all remember when they're rolling out the teenage vaccines, she lied about some poor child, 14 years old, who died from COVID. No, they were stage 4 cancer, and she lied about it. Then when they're rolling out the infant vaccines, she again went on TV and to terrify all the parents in this province, claiming that a baby had died from COVID. No, the child had genetic abnormalities and was born with massive birth defects and died of natural causes while testing positive for COVID. The child did not die of COVID. It was another attempt of terrorism by Dina Hinshaw to terrorize every parent in this province into having their kids injected with an experimental genetic therapeutic. So, getting back to my earlier comment and my earlier pride in being a united conservative, and that all of us can work together united to make this a better province. Everybody needs to know, all of us work to elect Danielle Smith as our premier. I, for one, am proud that she is our leader. All of us, every week, need to encourage her to hold the course and hold all of these people that were killing our children accountable. Everybody in AHS that was promoting childhood vaccines needs to be run out of AHS. Everybody in Alberta Health that was promoting childhood vaccines, in spite of the evidence that they were going to kill more children than COVID, need to be run out of Alberta Health. All of us need to write to Danielle Smith every week and ask her what she is doing about that. Look around this room. Like, we have all of our legacy media people that are here. Again, all the hysterics leading up to this event. And oh my goodness, the world is going to come to an end if people get together and talk about how dangerous these experimental genetic therapeutics are. Well, the world hasn't come to an end. You know, and we have all these 125 workers in Edmonton, so-called experts, again, gaslighting us all, claiming that we're all anti-vaxxers. We're not anti-vaccine. These aren't vaccines. They're experimental genetic therapeutics. So let's be clear here in our use of language. And I for one would actually like to thank Timothy Caulfield for his fine work in identifying the first 125 members of AHS and Alberta Health that need to be fired. Thank you very much for your time and attention. It's an honor and a privilege to be here and to be able to represent all of you in the 2 class actions that we're taking forward. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I told them the audience could use a little Jeff Rath. So, okay, as everybody is probably wondering, I've been monitoring time and everything else. What we want to do is we want to invite speakers back up. We'd planned for just a quick little roundtable discussion, but we've been obviously watching all of you sit there for the last close to 3 hours. So they're going to play a little, I don't know, a video of people stretching. You're welcome to stand up. If you got to use the bathroom, by all means. But you know, shake it out. We're going to do a quick 20-minute kind of, you know, it's 8:40 right now, so shortly after 9, we're going to try and finish up here. But with this all-star cast of people sitting in Alberta, I think it'd probably be pretty smart to bring them all back out and have them talk a little while longer. So 2-3 minutes, please stretch. If you got to use the bathroom, go ahead.
Why don't you join us at the UCP?
Go.
Wow, some powerful stuff there.
Mhm.
I don't know if you guys want to stay with us to catch the panel that they're going to do. But you know, I'm watching the Rumble chat here, and there's a lot of people putting some really great stuff in there. I've tried to capture some of the links that Welcome the Eagle has shared. But what do you all think? What do you think about what you're hearing right now?
Well, it's frustrating. It's both encouraging and frustrating for me because you know, you and I we both compared notes and we didn't even know each other. We were like some of the only people who went to Pfizer's own website and started looking at it, and it became blatantly obvious, and we don't have any medical training, that they were not safe and effective. And we knew that right off the bat. Yeah. And then we caught Bonnie Henry in BC lying straight out about AstraZeneca. She actually found or got notification on people getting injured with AstraZeneca, and 3 hours later went on air and said these aren't dangerous at all. So I'd say this isn't news to us. There's some, I mean, Makis is on that pedophile train, and he's nailing that pretty hard. So that's fairly new information, but I agree with the recommendations. Now, this is good that legacy media is there, and this is where I get encouraged. You know, the legacy media is there. This is a pretty predominant event, and it's run by, I guess, the Conservatives. So they have a whole bunch of and they have a whole bunch of MLAs, MPPs. It's MPP in BC.
It's a fundraiser
MLA
for the
here.
UCP.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of politicians in there, and they're getting this news for the first time. There's a lot of people in this credible event getting this news for the first time.
All I can do is hope and pray that with all this information that's being thrown at them in this 3-hour time frame, that they do the right thing. Those Coots boys that are still locked up, I hope they let them out. And the Coots boys that pled guilty, took pleas in advance, I hope they reverse those pleas, and I hope they withdraw all of the charges that were brought against them, because they, after hearing this, they've got to understand that they were doing the right thing. They were standing up when no one else in Alberta was standing up.
Right.
They were standing up when the governing leaders in Alberta should have been standing up, when they should have been looking after and doing the research and looking after what public health was doing and saying, and Alberta Health was doing and saying, and they didn't. The government dropped the ball. But then again, we know there was a bigger agenda at play.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and so it's pretty hard to not come to the conclusion. We know from all of the evidence we've seen and all the research we've done that they knew, full on knew, that it was not safe and effective. And then, I mean, it said right so in the Pfizer contract. So they signed the contract right out of the gate and then lied about safe and effective. And then Trudeau comes out, what was it, 4 months ago? He said, well, we knew there'd be some injuries after all of that. You you can't get on a plane, you can't get on a train. You're not going to sit next to somebody who's vaccinated and think you can travel with them. And then he gets on and say, well, we knew there was going to be some injuries. So they knew right out of the gate, right?
Well, Anita Anand signed the contract that specifically stated
Anand did that. Yeah.
How many people are vaccine injured? If you can finally get a doctor to say your injuries or your disabilities or your death was due to the vaccine, everybody that can get a doctor to say that or has it written in their medical files should be seeking out a lawyer and suing Anita Anand.
Yes.
Because she did this. She agreed to this contract, and then public health pushed the contract. So Anita Anand and every medical officer that pushed this contract and the CPSOs that then pushed the agenda on those doctors, every single one of those individuals, not the organizations, the individuals that pushed this need to be sued. They need to be held personally liable for not following through on their fiduciary duties. And their insurance companies won't cover them because they didn't live up to their fiduciary duties, that they take an oath and sign contracts to stand up and withhold.
I think it's much deeper. I think the punishment should be much deeper. Sure, there, all compensation should come out of their pockets
100%
and go to the victims for sure. And that's a good start.
Yeah. Well, I didn't say we were going to end there. I just said everybody who can get a doctor to say. But, there's a lot of great information coming out here. And so all of these politicians that are now here can no longer say they didn't know because they're making money off of this event. So they do know. And they're benefiting from now knowing. So every single one of them should 100% be removing the COVID vaccine off of the child vaccination immunization schedule that they just put on this year. They added it to the children's immunization schedule. It needs to be removed immediately after this. And for them not to do anything, to sit on their laurels and do nothing, then every single one of them shall be held accountable for every single injury that happens thus forward, because they now know.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to do a show on who's our list of enemies. Do you know who your enemy is? And one of them is it's all the people who are too cowardly to speak out because they don't want to lose their jobs. And that's kind of an enemy to the people, if you ask me, because, they would rather put their own well-being ahead of children dying. And there's doctors out there that know that children die. There are journalists out there who advocated for child vaccination or pregnant mothers getting vaccinated. And we saved and archived a lot of those articles for when we need them. And I noticed that CBC in particular has been pulling those articles back down and hiding the fact that they advocated for vaccinating pregnant mothers. And again, not a vaccine, but this is the common term, right?
Well, the Ministry of Truth is hard at work, deleting and rewriting history, isn't it? Anyone who's read 1984, George Orwell's book, understands what the Ministry of Truth does. And they are working really hard and diligently right now to erase history. But yeah, due to podcasters like ourselves and Welcome the Eagle, who has been saving and archiving these files. Fantastic.
Excellent.
Because they are going to come in handy when the court trials come or begin.
Yeah, good on you. We have had a whole team doing that, and we've got an archive hidden in a secret location that we will not name. But we've been saving all of this stuff since 2020, and making sure none of it gets erased. So, but we know that files off our own computers go missing, and we're not crazy. We verified it. We proved it. So there are a lot of nefarious things at work, and I think they're starting again. So we'll go back to the conference.
Are they starting again?
Yep.
Perfect.
Now, what I was going to say at the end. So we have a call to action that we've given everybody a call to action. When you leave here today, you'll be given a card. The card has an email address on it. It actually doesn't. It has a website. We want you to go to the website for our call to action. I was going to give you the big, long explanation, but I figured you're pretty quick study, so you know what to do. Go to the website, Follow the instructions. Listen to the video. A very nice man with a very nice voice will give you directions. He's not going to say anything about safe and effective, okay? It's nothing like that. What it will include is contacting your MLA, putting something relevant about tonight's call to action in your email, CC it to the Premier, take as much time as you want, as long as it's done by Friday, to get it done. While we do, thank you. While we have the panel discussion, we had a few unforeseen carbon tax type expenses. So there's going to be a bucket that goes by you. If you can at all put a little bit of money in there, we'd appreciate it. If you can't, no harm, no foul. But that would be much appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, back to Sean Newman.
Am I good? Yeah, I am good. All right. We're gonna let these guys share the mic. Usually, the hardest thing to do, you know, when I first started doing roundtables on stage, is I got talking to some comedians, and the comedian said, "You never let the crowd go because they'll never come back." And I've found that's actually quite the opposite, because when you got a cast like this, it's like everybody, you know, I can imagine how many people have traveled far and wide to come listen to you fine folks of Canadians be assembled in Alberta. So another round of applause for these wonderful men. I think they're going to give us 20 minutes. I mean, honestly, the audience will probably give us as much time as we want, boys. One of the things on this side is I know there's other things that have to happen tonight, so I'm going to be cognizant of the time. The one thing about this that intrigues me so much is, you know, I've been waiting for the UCP government or one of its constituencies to host something like this. And hats off to Calgary Lougheed, because they did. You have somewhere around 291 different viewing parties right now among the full sold out crowd here. I assume in that viewing crowd, you have the ear of some MLAs that maybe couldn't make it. And they're active government in Alberta. You have a premier who has come out at the start and ran on, basically, we need to have choice. We need to get rid of some things. What would you say? Where do we go from here? You've just listened to all of you talk. We listened to all of you talk. You have the camera pointed at you. And one of the things about my roundtables, especially with this many speakers, is I'm like, well, I'm not going to go one by one. If I have to, I will, but you can share mics, and I would love to hear your thoughts to the UCP government, the Alberta government, on where we go from here.
So, yeah, so I just want to say I came halfway across Canada to be here because I see that Alberta is a place where real change can happen. And so I'm willing to invest my time and energy and expertise here to help facilitate that. And I couldn't agree more. There's, in my opinion, frankly, Alberta Health Services needs to be gutted and repopulated with people of integrity. I think that's where you need to start. There's no question. I think it's been very clear that these people have misled you. And at the end of the day, we can bicker about the science all we want, but when you can no longer trust your public health professionals, they need to be replaced.
Just to follow on that, for those that don't know, the theory of the class action lawsuit involving the so-called vaccines is that all of our so-called public health officials collectively conspired under the name of preventing vaccine hesitancy to lie to each and every one of us and keep relevant information from us that we should have had with regard to these vaccines. Let's start, first of all, with the fact that we all know that the contracts say that the vaccines are not warranted for safety and were rushed to market without adequate testing. We know that to be true from contracts we've seen in other countries. We also know it to be true that these vaccines harm people and they're, again, will kill more children than COVID. They deliberately hid that information from everybody. So in a legal context, what that means is that they conspired to commit assault and battery on every single Canadian by preventing Canadians from getting informed consent or giving informed consent with regard to these experimental genetic therapeutics that never should have been rolled out in this country.
Just maybe a quick comment there. I mean, I think, the reality is the time to do something about these COVID shots in kids is long overdue. I mean, nobody takes you seriously anymore because we know you're lying to us. The uptake on the shot is less than 10% now. So parents know they've been lied to. So, unless you do something about this and you come clean on this, we're not going to take you seriously on anything. A water shortage in Calgary, forest fires somewhere else. Because the fact is, the trust is completely gone. It's just gone right now, right? So it's time. You got to do something.
I would just say to the politicians, be bold. Don't be afraid to be bold. Let yourselves have numerous opinions to your ear, but include our opinions, please. Please do include them, because we got there by listening to excellent science. We got there by listening to the United Kingdom Office of National Statistics. And when, as Mark quoted, in the springtime of 2022, it was fully known that the children who'd been experimented on and whose parents were brave enough to let their children take the jabs even before it was being mandated, so that they could see numbers and they could see hopefully that the numbers were going to be better if you used the vax. No, you were 82 times more likely to die as a child when given the vax in the experimental phase. It's horrific. It was hidden. It's time to take the blinders off our eyes, listen to the Office of National Statistics of Great Britain, and be a real politician. Be brave.
I believe that Alberta can be the first province in Canada. Maybe it's the only province in Canada that can bring back medical ethics, that can bring back informed consent, that can bring back respect for bodily autonomy, the sanctity of the patient-doctor relationship. Alberta can lead the country in this. We have to demand that we return to the Hippocratic Oath. Doctors have to return to the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm. We need a new college. We need new leadership at AHS. We need to get rid of lifetime bureaucrats, kick them out, stop recycling them in the same positions over and over. We can bring experts from outside of Alberta, people who haven't been in this cesspool, in this shadow government that AHS has run since 2008. We know they consume half the provincial budget. They take the money, they take half of Alberta taxpayer dollars, $23 billion, and they say, thank you, we'll take it from here and we'll do whatever the hell we want. That is unacceptable. Albertans deserve better, and we can lead the country in bringing back medical freedom to Canada.
On that point, it's time to fund good science. I have done all of that work without getting paid a cent. Thousands or more are going to Timothy Caulfield to fight misinformation. And this is factual science. We need vials, we need access to it, and it's about time we fund research into this and find out exactly why vaccine injuries occur, and then fund how can we help and fix and help those who are vaccine injured.
Well, I'd just like to add one more thing to the politicians. We have had an intense psychological operation carried out on our species. Canada has been particularly bad in this. And so a lot of people have some very wrong, and I don't mean wrong morally, I mean false concepts in their head, right? And that isn't their fault. We've been through such an intense psychological operation, the kind of psychological operation that was only used previously against enemies in war, but it's been used through our own governments against our own people. So I can understand that politicians feeling this thing is like, well, I've got a bunch of people over here who resisted it or recovered from it. They've looked at the data, they've looked at the autopsies, and they can tell the difference between a lot of details. Any one of us could have spoke for 10 hours today on this stuff, right? And yet, what do you have over here? Safe and effective vaccine. It's a safe and effective vaccine. I mean, this is mind control stuff. So I could see a politician going, well, look, I've got a lot of people that are going to vote against me if I do the right thing. But here you've got a lot of people who are already showing they're going to vote for you if you do the right thing. But here's the thing. By doing the right thing, like has happened here tonight, the people who have succumbed, the people who have been the worst victims of the psychological operation are going to learn the truth, and they're going to vote for you. You're not going to get people to know the truth, to vote for you by continuing the operation. But by releasing the truth and promoting the truth, you're going to keep those people who are awake and making sense, and you're going to release the other people, and they're going to join and support you. So be bold.
I just want to jump in. I just want to jump in and make a political point, because again, we're here as united conservatives. So we need to stand behind our leader, Danielle Smith, and we need to encourage her to ignore all of the legacy media noise, and every time the left-wingers go, oh my God, she said they're the most discriminated. Oh my goodness, she's reconsidering childhood vaccines. All of this hysterical nonsense like we saw coming from little Timmy Caulfield leading up to tonight, all of this nonsense. We need to encourage our leader to ignore this noise and remember that the people that listen to that crap do not vote for her anyway, will not vote for her because they're fully indoctrinated communists, socialists, or deep orange NDPers who are always going to vote against common sense and a united conservative province. And we need to tell Danielle to stand up to this nonsense and stop listening to all the lefties whining in her ear. Some of them, unfortunately, in her cabinet.
Byram, you might just give me one moment. I wanted to speak to this safe and effective. You are only allowed to call a product safe and effective if there are no danger signals. It's the absence of danger signals that allow you to say 15 years out or 20 years out, this is proving safe and effective. The danger signals are there. The danger signals are huge. The danger signals are 20 times worse than anything before. And the anything before was stretched over 30 years. So you take 20 times 30, it means it's 600 times more dangerous than all vaccines ever given over the last 30 years. 600 times more dangerous, that is unsafe. And forget about the effective aspect. We've seen how it's ineffective, how it makes you more likely to get COVID. But that's the big issue. That's the big issue, the complete lack of safety, the complete presence of danger signals. We can't hide our heads in the sand. Please, dear politicians, join us and understand the real science and the real numbers that Jessica Rose and others up here have given us. Thank you.
And I just wanted to point out as well, for those who want to try and affect real positive change, I understand that it's very difficult. Legacy media has built up, it's state-funded media, that they have established this very large bubble and have encased a lot of Canadians in this bubble. And they keep feeding propaganda to them. And we saw that with this event. It was incredible. I already gave you the example. The people who did a little bit of research, they would know I'm not a veterinarian. And veterinarians are great. They know their stuff. But they're trying to do it to defame, people like me. They conflated this whole thing with other childhood vaccines. Yet this is focused on COVID-19 shots. You can see the propaganda. People just wake up to it. But one of the other things where I think a lot of people get confused, right, is there's this whole concept that's promoted that there's this very broad agreement among most of the world about the science, right? They call it scientific consensus. If you only have one who disagrees, there's not a consensus, but they try and make it seem like we're a fringe minorities. But let me tell you, we have people like Timothy Caulfield. That's why I keep calling him out, because he talks the big talk, but he will never walk the walk ever, and we all know why. But I just want to let you know, and I want politicians who are trying to do the right thing here know there's one place where they do have to engage us on the science. and that's in courts. And I have served in over 20 cases as an expert witness, and I can tell you the number of lies that I've exposed from these so-called experts in court. They lie. They do not understand the science. Let me give you an example of a typical Timothy Caulfield, and that was Peter Uni. He was pitted against me in a court case. He came with a few pages of a report. Mine was hundreds with citations, hundreds of citations, peer-reviewed scientific papers. People don't understand because it doesn't get publicized, but that's the one place. So that's what I say to legacy media. Why don't you go to the court cases and look where the science is being discussed? It is being hotly debated. Lies are being called out. Misunderstandings are being called out by your champions when they show up in court. And it's incredible. These people. So Peter Uni, for example, in his case, his report was thrown out by the judge as complete and utter hearsay evidence. He shortly left the country and went to the UK after that, and so he should have. But that's what happens in court. So when they do show up to the debate, they can't handle it. And it happens in the courts, and has to be seen in the courts. And that is exactly why almost every single court case in Canada has been decided in the absence of looking at the data.
I just wanted to share a little bit of breaking news with you. I found out a few hours ago something that very exciting. Last year, some of us submitted a vaccine injury paper to the Lancet, to one of the biggest journals in the world, co-authored by Dr. Peter McCullough, myself, Dr. Mark Trozzi, Dr. Roger Hodkinson, and other doctors. That paper was about autopsy series, the largest autopsy series in the world of COVID vaccine, people who took COVID-19 vaccines and then died suddenly a few days or a few weeks after. That paper was downloaded hundreds of thousands of times, and within 24 hours, there was so much pressure put on by the pharmaceutical industry that the Lancet took the paper down, canceled it, and basically wanted to cancel it forever so that it would never see the light of day. I just found out a few hours ago that that paper has passed peer-reviewed and is going to be published. It is the largest autopsy series in the world. 325 autopsies of COVID vaccinated people who dropped dead a few hours or a few days or a few weeks after taking the COVID-19 vaccine. We did a rigorous review of these autopsies, and we found that about 74% of the cases of sudden death were caused or contributed to by the vaccine. That is now a peer-reviewed paper that's going to be published. And the reason I'm telling you that is that there is more evidence coming every single day. And it's not a little bit of evidence. It's not a case report here that they're going to dismiss, or a case report there, or a paper that the Lancet is going to take down and say, don't look at this autopsy series, and we'll just bury it and make sure it never sees the light of day. There's going to be a tsunami of evidence of the harm of these COVID-19 vaccines, whether it's harming children, pregnant women, adults. And my message to the politicians is get ahead of this. Get ahead of this if you can. Don't chase after when all the evidence is out and then you're caught with your pants down. Get ahead of it now. Thank
you. Seeing as we're sharing some good news, another little bit of good news. Some of you folks might not know, but approximately 2 months ago, I joined with groups of scientists and doctors from Latin America, and we attended the Parliament of Costa Rica. And we gave a press conference there, and I'll make sure I post it so you guys can laugh at my Spanish, because I was the only Spanish as I'm doing my best second language. But I just found out yesterday that a court in Costa Rica has ruled that the medical colleges cannot interfere with doctors' speech.
That would be nice. Whoa.
Alberta can lead the way, because to see how backwards we are here, I'm from Ontario. I set my practice down. I had no problems. I set down my income at the beginning of 2021. I wasn't seeing patients. I have no patient complaint. I just went and told people the truth, free of charge. 4 years, hard work for nothing. And the college revoked my license. And right before they revoked my license, the other guy they had in that morning was his third sexual assault. They let him keep his license. So I think this idea that if you're a plumber, the plumbing organization can suppress your speech, or if you're a doctor, the medical college can suppress your speech. This has got to go. That's not a free society.
Dr. Trozzi, I want to speak right after you, if you don't mind. And I'd like the audience to realize that Dr. Trozzi's practice and my practice were within about 80 to 100 kilometers of each other, both in central Ontario. I had my license suspended on the same day as Dr. Trozzi did. It was about 3 weeks after we'd gone in to help a fellow colleague whose patients weren't able to be seen. At that point, we still had our licenses. At that point, we weren't suspended. We went into her family practice, started seeing patients who were vax injured and many other troubles in her practice, helped out for a day and a half. But sorry, it was into 2 weeks by the end of it. And after 2 weeks, the college came down and announced that they were going into final measures of removing Dr. Trozzi's and my license. So my license will be as fully removed as Dr. Trozzi in the next 30 days when my hearing occurs in Ontario, and exactly what happened to him will now be happening to me. I'd love to come to Alberta and work in Alberta. And it doesn't need to be just for me, but I think Alberta is ideally suited geographically to have doctors from British Columbia who are losing their right to practice and doctors from Ontario who are losing the right to their practice for one and only one reason. We're speaking about scientific comparative choice. We think that people should be able to hear scientific comparative information to make their information and to not be hurt by a harm vax. To not be hurt by a harm vax is the crucial thing.
And I just want to say, if given the state of the College of Physicians and Surgeons Ontario, which I consider they have committed negligent mass homicide against the people of my province, given what they're up to, if they had not attacked me, if I had not been investigated, if they had not revoked my license, I should be ashamed. It's like if you're a Christian and Satan worshipers think you're all right, you got a problem. Right? And just to add to that, the practice he and I went to save, Dr. Crystal Luchke, what were her non-crimes? She refused to commit fraud on death certificates. Someone alleged that she gave someone an exemption from the genetic injection. Okay? They stripped her of her license. Her patients were suffering. Chris got there a week before me. We got a call from Michael Alexander saying, she's got 1,700 patients. A lot of them are chronic. I'm an emergency trauma doctor, but okay, I have a license. I still had a license. It's interesting. They didn't need it. They were attacking me, but I wasn't making any money. I haven't billed the government a dime. I haven't made 10 cents working in 4 years, and I've worked my butt off for this cause. The interesting thing was, when I gave, he got there a week before me. I said, Chris, let's go and try to save Crystal's practice. It's going to take two of us because we're both very busy fighting this war. I don't have time to go to work and do the things we might love doing. I had to let the college know, on this day, I will resume practice at this address. Well, they knew it was Crystal Luchke's practice. What does a bully say? You say you're going to stick up for like, you ain't going to save Crystal Luchke's practice. I worked half a day before they suspended my license. When I went back to work to save Crystal Luchke's practice, they suspended my license immediately. Now, here's the bizarre thing. Now, the data is not as bad as the reality I saw. And, you know, maybe this is the good Lord's way of saying, Marky, you're right. Because in that morning, I saw 4 patients before they suspended my license. In those 4 patients, while their doctor was away and couldn't protect them, and somebody else made money injecting with this genetic goo, right? In those 4 patients, I saw 6 major adverse reactions that had happened over that interviewing period. I'm talking new brain cancer, new lung cancer, massive blood clots in the lung, massive blood clots in the legs, shingles, and Bell's palsy. And so in a case like that, you know, when the good Lord says, you're clearly right, stick to your guns, I think we should all stick to our guns.
We will stick to our guns.
So some of you may or may not know, I'm also been representing a number of doctors in this province that are being persecuted by the College of Physicians and Surgeons. And one of the things that really frosts me doing this work is the fact that I know for a fact that complaints were filed with the college against Dr. Verna Yu and Dr. Dina Hinshaw, specifically with violating one of the most basic tenets of medicine. That is that patients should be entitled to have informed consent with regard to medical treatment absent coercion and undue influence. And it was clear with the policies that they were enacting, Verna Yu at AHS demanding that doctors get the shot or be fired, Dina Hinshaw basically providing advice to universities that 18 and 19-year-old kids should be required to have the shot to attend school, to play in sports, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things were coercive and violated the most fundamental principles of medical ethics. Those complaints were dismissed within hours of being submitted on the basis, oh, well, you didn't provide there was insufficient evidence being provided. In other cases that we're dealing with, oh, insufficient evidence, and insufficiency of evidence isn't a problem. They'll spend hundreds of thousands of dollars hiring private investigators from other provinces to undergo 2-year investigations of doctors like Dr. Eric Payne so that they can keep the complaint open and alive against him to make his life as miserable as possible. This is the Alberta College of Physicians and Surgeons. So from my perspective, they are complicit in this entire conspiracy to force these unsafe experimental genetic vaccines on our kids. Every one of them, just like all of the people in AHS and all the people in Alberta Health that are complicit in this type of behavior, need to be rooted out and fired. And we need to be asking our leader, Danielle Smith, to live up to the promises that she made when she was running to be leader of this party and get after it. Pitter patter.
With trying to
I just
sneak in
wanna
a
say-
comment here.
I support the Alberta police force. We need our own police force. And I'll tell you why. Because a new Alberta police force would be busy 24/7 just handling the crimes that are being committed by AHS managers, executives, directors, the college officials, the Alberta Medical Association, you name it. They'd be so busy with those crimes, they wouldn't have time for any other crimes. There's that much crime being committed. One more thing I want to tell you about our courts. Our courts are completely rotten. We have the worst judges in Canada. And I'll tell you, at Alberta's highest, I've been to court 20 times. I've been in front of dozens of judges. I can tell you, I know them all. I know when I walk into a courtroom, they've already ruled against me. They've already made their deal with AHS or the college. The top judge in Alberta at the highest level, the Court of Appeal of Alberta, Chief Justice Ritu Kular, was a college lawyer. She sat on tribunals sabotaging the medical licenses of other Alberta doctors. She was the partner in an Edmonton law firm that sabotaged my medical license. She was the senior partner in that law firm. Her partner actually sabotaged my medical license. She was appointed by Justin Trudeau about a year ago to be the Chief Justice of the Alberta Court of Appeal. We have rotten courts. We have a rotten healthcare bureaucracies, AHS, the college. We have a lot of fixing to do.
I'm no military guy, and I'm certainly no RCMP or officer, but I've been told going first through the door is probably the spot you don't want to be. All these men have gone through first through the door and then some. With time running out on us, gents, because I know this podcast where we can talk for a really long time if you like. But tonight we've been here for a healthy time frame. I'm going to start on the far end with Dr. Eric Payne. When you're the first through the door, you're trying to implore the Alberta government to be the first through the door, so to speak, with Canada when it comes to childhood and mRNA jab vaccine. I don't know what you guys will put your spin on it. Just your final thoughts, and then we'll thank you guys for coming, and we'll thank everybody for being here and live streaming. But we'll go one by one here, and we'll start with Dr. Eric Payne.
Yeah, I mean, very thankful for being here. Over the course of the last few years, I thought when I ride back in Alberta, you're going to be living, the dream back home. My wife's from Brandon, Manitoba. Our kids were young. We've had that totally uprooted, but the reality is, I truly believe that I've gained so much more because the amount of lies that we've been living under that have been exposed as a result of this. The pediatric COVID injection story is just one of the most low-lying, egregious fruits. But we've by being first out, you see that you get hammered down. I'll just one anecdote to leave you guys with. there were 70 physicians in Alberta who wrote a letter in the fall of 2021, about a week after my letter came out. 3,500 healthcare professionals in Alberta, including nurses, signed that letter. So there just wasn't this fringe minority. The college went and phoned every member, every doctor who signed that letter got a phone call and asked, are you sure you want your name on that letter? So, they're successful because they've scared physicians into being quiet. And you don't have a choice right now. You have to stand up and speak. It's just as simple as that.
Dr. David, Speaker.
Wow. In the whole pandemic, I've lost 5 jobs, and I've not worked a paid job since last year, May. Now, I worked on COVID since January 20. Well, on the team at Mac, which first isolated the virus, and I thought I'm a virologist. I'm here. I'm first on the scene. A good career boost. And so, as a good scientist, I ask difficult things. Is this the lab leak, the whole HIV part to it? And I was sidelined March 17th, 2020, and placed under investigation. And in that, I asked 10 times, what have I done wrong? You'll find out next week. That was 10 weeks of silence. I was sidelined. I was cleared July. I got a postdoctoral fellowship leadership award of the faculty in August, and then fired in October. And scientific debate is gone if you speak up. If you aren't on their side, you will be sidelined and pushed out. Science is about asking difficult things and challenging each other over the facts. It's time that we got back to discussions, debates. We are here. The other side with the facts, who slams us and calls us misinformation, anti-vax people, don't have the balls to show up here. Timothy Caulfield is a coward. And 2, if they can't show up and defend their science, they should not get funded and should not be listened to. So it's time things change.
A lot of things happen behind closed doors. One place that's very private, I guess, has the word private in it, called Privy Council. The Privy Private Council of Canada in April, May of 2021, before there had ever been a mandate in Canada to take the vaccines, they were informed of the horrific numbers that were going on with early deaths, where nursing home patients were doing worse and quickly worse and dying because they were getting the jabs, and that untold numbers of adolescents were having severe reactions and quick reactions and sudden deaths. And that 600-fold degree of danger signal was already present in April, May of 2021. And what the Privy Council of Canada did, led by the gentleman whose name I believe you know, and in those privileged private conversations, they were aware of these massive vaccine-affected injuries going on. And all they did was hire a public relations firm to make sure that it was not understood by the population to be as bad as it was. And their second thing they did was start their mandating process for Canadians. And that was when they were informed. When they were informed how bad it was, they did what they did. Privy Council of Canada, April, May 2021. You can look it up.
Well, I hope I'm targeted to the question. I had a very quiet life. None of you guys heard of me until 4 years ago. I was a young guy on my own. I've been on my own at the age of 16. So you can imagine I worked very hard to finish high school, and I lived in a car. I went through a lot of things. And I've never been a big money guy. Even after I graduated, money's never been my top priority. But I had worked hard. I had some things. And the thing I loved about my job, there's a lot of things I loved about my job. I love emergency medicine. I love trauma medicine. I love studying and being prepared and always trying to be polished for anything that can come in the door, whether it's a breech delivery in the middle of the night or a car accident with collapsing lungs. And it's a real shame to have people like myself and my colleagues removed from the service of our fellow citizens. You know, I mean, we're good at what we do. That's really why we're here, ultimately. But I like simple rules. I mean, you know, one needs to navigate through life. And if you look at the pile of legal books, God, you know, I'm never going to memorize them. And it doesn't really matter that much, because as I understand it, there's one highest law in this world, certainly for me, and that's the golden rule. Do unto others what you want done unto yourself. And so for 25 years, an imperfect man, like all of us, but I went to work. And at the beginning of my day, as I would, you know, I mean, emergency medicine, the kind of merge I did, you're the only doctor in the building. Whatever happens is your problem. So, you know, there's a side of you like, I'm picking up the weight for the day. And I would always start my day and say, just practice the golden rule, man. Just treat these people the way you want to be treated. And what does that mean? That means be honest. That means be open. That means work hard. That means don't brush people off. Oh, go see your family doctor. I don't have a family doctor. Oh, it's just a headache. Here's a pill. No, do the homework. And I did good work. I've had a very good career and a lot of great feedback from patients all through my career. And then one day, they tried to tell me progressively over the year 2020, the golden rule wasn't going to apply no more in my job. Right? They were saying, no. But I'll tell you the honest truth. I told every patient from the beginning, as soon as I figured it out, which was, I was the cloaked doctor in May 2020 on the Rebel News. You see the whistle? That was me. The roar with the low voice in my face. That was me. Okay? And
use the force, Luke. Use the force.
And when these jobs were coming, I used to walk into the patient room and look at the patient, and there they were with the satanic muzzle on their face of no benefit. And I'd close the door and I'd say, you don't have to wear that for me. And I'd love you to give me permission too. And I never recommended, as soon as I read the ingredients, as soon as I saw it coming, I'm amazed I lasted as long as I did. But I would come in, I told every mother I saw, I say, they are coming with an injection. They're going to tell you it's a safe and effective feed. It's a dangerous genetic experiment. If you have to run to the mountains with your child and go without food, I would recommend it. And when we got to the end of 2020, and I could see that they were literally getting ready to inject you folks with this stuff. And I knew what was in it. And I knew enough. I mean, boy, I've learned a lot from my colleagues here from the laboratories. There's a lot worse stuff in it than there was supposed to be in it. But what was supposed to be in it was bad. And another old saying came to my mind. And you know, I have to thank my mother. God bless her. She passed away in 2020. But which was, you cannot serve God and be a slave to money. And up until 2020, I could go to work and I could serve God and I could follow the golden rule. And even though I didn't chase the money, at the end of the month, I got enough money that was more than enough for a guy that used to live in a car to feed my family and even had a horse, right? My childhood dream. But at the end of 2020, I found repeatedly that came to my mind. You cannot serve God and be a slave to money. And that made the decision very simple. Didn't mean it was fun, giving up all my stuff. I loved my job, but it was very clearly the right thing to do. So I think a lot of these basic principles that have been given to us will carry us through this. So they have me.
Dr. Makis.
I came to Alberta very optimistic, very excited. And I remember there was a leader of the hospital in Manitoba who told me, be very careful. The politics in Alberta is completely different. I had no idea what they meant. I worked hard. I ran a cancer program in Edmonton at Cross Cancer Institute. 2 years later, my cancer program was sabotaged. They dragged me out with security and basically framed me with all kinds of bogus complaints. About 2 years after that, my lawyer tells me there's going to be a money offer on the table. AHS wants to give you money. I said, okay. And they put an offer on the table, $400,000 tax-free. I can give a copy of that document to anybody who wants it. I'm not supposed to, but I can, but I will. I had $400,000 put on the table, and they said, here's the money, tax-free, sign a non-disclosure agreement. You will never talk about what happened at your cancer center, that it was sabotaged. Take the money and go. And I actually told my lawyer, don't even respond. Don't respond. Let the $400,000 money offer run out. They gave me a week. The money offer ran out. Within 6 hours, within 6 business hours, I had a letter from the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta saying we've launched a new investigation against you. And then I had lawyers tell me, we will never let you practice medicine again until you sign that deal. We will wage a war of attrition against your family because we have unlimited money. There was an AHS lawyer, college lawyers that have told me this. They have unlimited money to wage a war against my family. And I said no. And my life has been a living hell ever since. That was 2017. In 2018, they tried to have me declared mentally unfit to practice medicine. Why? What was the reasoning? Because I filed a lawsuit against AHS for breach of contract and sabotaging my cancer program. That made me mentally unfit. So I've been fighting with AHS for a long time. I have seen things you people wouldn't believe, to quote Blade Runner 1982. I'm serious. I'm serious. I have seen things you wouldn't believe me if I told you. The level of corruption and fraud that goes on. My parents fled communism. Communist Czechoslovakia, 1988. I ended up in a United Nations refugee camp. That's where I learned English. That's why my English isn't perfect. My family fled communism to bring me to a better place, a better life. And Canada was that better place for a very, very long time. An amazing place. I don't know at this point if this country can be saved. And now I'm fighting for my children. And I could have left Alberta many times, but I love this province. This is an incredible province, beautiful province, rich province, amazing people. It is worth fighting for. And I fight for my kids. And I think you should fight for your kids. We can't lose this province. We can't lose this province. We can't let it go full communist the way it's heading right now. So the reason I'm telling you this, and I want to leave you with this, is support the MLAs that are doing the right things. Support the leaders that are doing the right things. Support Danielle Smith. Give her the support. Give her the support she needs to do the right thing. I think we can turn things around in Alberta. I think we can be a shining beacon, not just for the rest of Canada, not just for North America. We can be a shining beacon for the rest of the world.
Before, Jeff. Am I muted? No, there we go. Daryl, did they pass around the bucket? They did? It's all done. Okay, good. Just on support, I thought it was a perfect time. Barrister Rath. Well, you laugh, but in fairness, I don't see all the constituencies doing this. So I think it's beyond, it's on us to support it and to show them that we care. Speicher.
One more slide that I wanted to speak to that came out of Dr. Payne's presentation earlier. And I think it illustrates the points that all of us have been talking about tonight. And they're referred to variously as either the rainbow graphs or the death spike graphs that were published by AHS. And what happened was that AHS was publishing all their data on their weekly dashboard. And all of a sudden, an international podcaster noticed, oh my goodness, look at this Alberta data that's published by AHS. It demonstrates that for senior citizens over the age of 80, there's this huge exponential increase in deaths of people between days 5 and day 8 immediately following either their first or their second shot of the vaccine. Oh my goodness, look at this. That shows a very strong correlation between vaccinating senior citizens and their immediate deaths. So when this came out in the public, right? And keep in mind, I cross-examined Alberta government officials about this during the Hinshaw case, and they all wanted nothing to do with this conversation. But what was the reaction of AHS to having it pointed out that their own data demonstrated a correlation that at the very least should have been investigated? It wasn't necessarily proof positive that they're killing senior citizens with the shots, but there was a very strong correlation that required investigation. What did our public health officials do? Did they conduct an investigation? Of course not. They immediately tried to scrub the internet of the graphs and tried to bury the information, hide the information. The only reason that it's in Dr. Payne's presentation is he recovered it through the use of the Wayback Machine, because to this day, AHS doesn't want anybody to know that those graphs exist or that data exists. So, getting back to my earlier suggestion that there's lots of people at AHS that need to be singled out and fired, the people that made the decision not to, from a public health perspective, not to investigate that correlation, not to investigate that death spike, need to be fired. And the people that thought, oh, the proper reaction to being presented with that type of data is to simply try to bury the data and hide it from people so that they won't let their grandparents get vaccinated, those people need to be fired. There are a lot of issues that still need to be dealt with in this province, including the fact, and I'll finish on this, that Cleveland Clinic study, again, that was referenced in various presentations tonight, showed a huge correlation between the more shots you get, the worse your health outcomes were, and the more likely you were to die. This isn't, the University of Botswana, Lower, Volta, or some, third world institution. This is the Cleveland Clinic. It's like the Mayo Clinic. It's a 51,000 person study. It was a high-powered study. Unlike a lot of other public health institutions, the Cleveland Clinic didn't fire their unvaccinated healthcare workers. They didn't fire their unvaccinated doctors, and they had this robust control group of about 15% of their staff that did not get vaccinated. That's the black line of unvaccinated people at the bottom that the Cleveland Clinic was able to follow. So given that one study, on the strength of that data derived from 51,000 people, why is anybody in this province being forced to get these vaccines or being given these vaccines when clearly they're bad for your health and nobody should be taking them and the government should not be making them available?
Bridle. Dr. Bridle.
Yeah, so Sean, I appreciate the analogy you used, which was the military one, and how can we encourage Alberta as a province to be the first through the door, and what can we share from what we learned, what our experiences were. I'd say from my experience, it was very easy to do. It's not something to be to have trepidation about. I have a very supportive wife. I have 2 boys. One has Down syndrome. If you noticed, when I spoke out publicly, essentially when I let it rip, it was about the children, consistently about the children. That is where the risk-benefit analysis is the most extreme. I think these shots there needs to be a worldwide moratorium on these shots for people of all ages, but it is an extreme when it comes for children, and that's where I felt that, I had to speak up. To be the first through the door is not difficult when you're doing it to protect children, right? They depend on us. They depend on us and adults. And so, you know, in terms of here in Alberta, the same thing. The government of Alberta, you can step through this door easily. When you stand on the science and when you stand on truth, and if you're a person of integrity, you actually care about our children, it is very easy to step through that door. And you better do it sooner rather than later, because if you don't, our children will continue to be abused. If you haven't seen on the world stage, you know, you're all probably aware of this, you know, global pandemic accord that they're trying to push through. They've shown us their hand. They're going to continue. I also don't know if you saw, there was a video released very recently where Teresa Tam and a bunch of other public health officers were having discussions that they thought were behind closed doors, out of the public eyes. The thing that stood out to me in that was incredible, where Teresa Tam was basically saying that we are completely unprepared. And this whole idea of a pandemic preparedness, global pandemic accord, is all predicated on the fact that we were unprepared. Completely unprepared as a country to react and respond to COVID-19. And that's what she's saying about disease X coming up, or the bird flu, if they can amplify fear about that enough, right? That Canada remains unprepared. She has openly said, we've got lots of experience from COVID-19, but if it comes to something like the avian flu, we're not prepared for that, right? It's constantly that message that we're not prepared. And I can't emphasize this enough. We were prepared. As I always say, the reason why Canada appeared to be unprepared is because we took our well-constructed pandemic preparedness plans and threw them out at the declaration of this COVID-19 pandemic. We were prepared, and we still remain prepared. So when Teresa Tam tells the country we're not prepared and we got to come up with plans, those plans will include masking your children again, coercing them into shots, locking them down, not allowing them to go to school, not allowing them to interact with their friends, not allowing them to interact with a microbiological world, which they need to in order to develop proper health. And it's all going to happen all over again if the Alberta government does not step through the door again and do what's right on behalf of our children.
Your doctors, folks. Thank you for coming out on a Monday night, for tuning in on a Monday night.
Well, there you go.
Wow, powerful, a full, what, almost 4 hours worth of hardcore information and truth. And if the UCP doesn't do something positive with this truth, then we know exactly where their boots stand, and it's not on the soil of Canada.
Well, man, now they can't say they didn't know. Well, we're going to be back. Just confirmed it during the show. We're going to be back on Thursday with James Roguski. So talking about medical autonomy and sovereignty. Now we're going to be talking about national sovereignty with James Roguski, who's leading the banner on the WHO pandemic treaty and how to stop that.
Exactly. Thank you for sticking with us. We appreciate your patronage. We appreciate your financial support. We can't do this without you. It does cost a lot of money to put this on, and it all comes out of our own pockets. We are not sponsored and we are not funded by anybody, but hopefully you. So thank you for sticking with us.
All right,
Enjoy
everybody.
your evening.
Yeah, enjoy. Good night.
Good night.